Recently I travelled to Suffolk to meet a man known as the Rogue Lord, and in this video we're going to look at what he's doing to help wildlife on his land, how farming can work alongside rewilding, how he looks after and cares for his livestock, and most importantly why we need your garden. Well, hello everyone and welcome to a very special episode of Wild Your Garden, because today I'm with a good friend of mine, Hugh Somerleyton, and Hugh is, you are the first official Lord I've ever met, Hugh, so thank you for taking the time to meet me.
That's a high bar.
And Hugh, Hugh is on a mission, and today we're going to be talking about his mission and some of the amazing things he's achieved and looking to achieve in the coming weeks, months and indeed years. So Hugh, why don't you start me off with a little bit of family history, because I'm sure you won't mind me saying your house is not your average run-of-the-mill house, is it?
No, that is true. Well, so first of all, thank you, family. I know it's been a long time coming and it's a real treat for me too. And so just in terms of that context, so we are here in North Suffolk, kind of on the edge of the Southern Broads. The Broads National Park runs out sort of at Alton Broad, just a few miles from here along the River Waveney. And actually just east of us, we've got the North Sea. So we're kind of tucked up between Great Yarmouth and Lowestoft and the Broads National Park at a place called Somerleyton. Also the name of this house, as you say, it's not an ordinary house, where my family have been living since the middle of the 19th century.
Wow. So
we were kind of a classic in the kind of Downton Abbey kind of, everyone's seen Downton Abbey, but we are the kind of industrialists.
This is far superior.
Well, thank you. I'll take that. You haven't been inside yet, so. But yeah, so we're kind of an industrial family, made money in the West Riding of Yorkshire, in particularly in Halifax in the 19th century, 18th and then 19th century, and some of the spoils of that, as was typical of the time, that industrial rake's progress moved out to buy land and join the kind of the fashion of land ownership and big houses, which probably seemed a great idea at the time, but not quite so sure nowadays. And I suppose the unusual thing is that probably that was likely to be Yorkshire somewhere, as a Yorkshire family of many generations. Yes. And so I always feel a little bit of a fraud here in Suffolk. And when I do visit Halifax, which I love doing, and there's a lot of Crossley memorabilia there, I feel, of course, a bit of a fraud there, because I'm not any longer from there. But yeah, so
you've got Suffolk imposter syndrome. I
have a bit, yeah. I don't know when we've been here long enough when you can earn that, but there are a few people I come across who've been here for since the Revolution or Cromwell or something, and you kind of can't really compete with that. But yeah, so it's our home, and we're kind of custodians and look after this amazing house and garden, but also the kind of surrounding farmland, which
we will come on to. So first and foremost, I should say, if you ever want to visit this amazing home and gardens, people can of course do that, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't come and knock on Hugh's front door, but there is a general public area, isn't there?
Yeah, well, we're in hospitality, so hopefully you'll get a broad welcome. But yes, we're open kind of like most houses seasonally from sort of Easter till the end of September.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a nice day out.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm particularly interested in this fabulous little walkway that you've got here, because I'm actually looking to create something very similar but on a much less grand scale on the side of my house, with these stone columns and a massive wisteria. You couldn't get much more English country garden, could you? I don't think. No,
and actually this is, so we're sort of sitting in what was an orangery that there was a huge amount more glass, if that is possible, here, including a winter garden, and that extended out to here. So when it was taken down, the glass was taken down, this is kind of the frame that was left. Wow. So it's a kind of nice to have that kind of architectural backdrop to a formal setting. Great for occasionally when we rent the place out for a kind of summer lunch.
Yes.
And for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is one of the most romantic interviews I think I've ever done. It's glorious. Surrounded by wisteria, this lovely little sort of hidey hole here with this great view over the formal gardens. Absolutely fantastic. Anyway, I digress. So let's start at the beginning, shall we, Hugh? Sounds obvious. What was the trigger for you, or is there a moment in time that you recall where you had an immediate kind of intimacy with nature, or that kind of experience that you thought, wow, these things called animals are quite amazing,
Yeah, well, it's kind
not to put you on the spot.
No, it's a good one actually. There's some quite sort of fun segues into that, I suppose. So first of all, I'm absolutely happy to say that I grew up on what was pretty traditional farming estate with a chute, and probably spent half of my available time, spare time, with the gamekeeper, who was like another father to me, lived just across the park. And of course, first of all, I'm the first to admit, my prism, if you like, of understanding the countryside was a gamekeeper's. So you had a very binary world of things you wanted to save and things you wanted to kill in order to save them. So vermin of all kinds, so corvids, weasels, stoats, hedgehogs,
foxes,
you name it, foxes.
Yeah.
And that, I don't think I broke out of that world particularly until sort of well into my 20s. And there was a period in my 20s when trees became a big thing. And when, as my parents were getting older, before they died, I was trying to pinpoint exactly that. What was that trigger? And I wonder whether it was guilt, actually, for the way we were farming, the way I'd grown up, and a sort of young man's desire to counterbalance that. But Dad used to call me a sort of feckless environmentalist, and to be fair, he was sort of a little bit right, probably. But at the time, although I was rabidly, like anyone young, when you get a position, a political or radical position as a younger person, you tend to go all in, don't you, and get very irritated by older people. And my big thing was I used to go around the big old trees and to cut the ivy off. Not really appreciating that actually, if those two things have become symbiotic essentially over many years, or maybe hundreds of years, you actually do more damage to the tree than not. And then, and I think this is probably a really critical thing to impart, but I then had a restaurant business in London. I was very authentic about what we were cooking, but I was miles off thinking about where we were cooking came from, particularly the sustainability and welfare of the animals. It was a Middle Eastern thing. It was another big area for me, and I travelled a lot there. But when I then came home to look after the place when my father became ill, I think quite quickly then I sort of rediscovered my old agricultural, rural dimension to my character, and just became and by the way, I'm mid-30s at this point. So it's not like I can't pretend.
I would have said now, personally.
Right, I'm happy to, yes, make sure that goes out. And I just sort of I had a very hard farm manager who I'd grown up with a bit, but he was uncompromising on the environment. I mean, as in the land was man's sort of
Set in
slave.
his ways, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much at the time, but he was a pretty strong accent of that. And nothing could stand in the way of sort of the industrialisation of the farm, and field scrapes were filled in with waste potatoes to bring them level, to make it easier to farm. Clay was dug out to ease clay holes to make it better for farming. Hedges were cut very tight and ploughed too close to, and then caught spray. There was no compromises. And
then of course the farmers were paid, many decades ago to remove hedgerows to make farming more efficient. Yeah,
so Dad, one of the things he stood in the way of actually was that, rather sentimentally, and I think this was more of a nostalgic view of the countryside rather than an environmental view of the countryside. But actually, yes, Dad stood in the way of his progress in that regard, and we never ripped out any of. Some of our tenants did. Ironically, now some of the biggest fields we farm are those that have been given up by tenants that we weren't in total control of back then. But yeah, so I think when I came back home, I did have a sort of bit of an awakening, and maybe you asked about the defining point. The defining point was I had quite an enlightenment.
It doesn't have to be one, by the way, but
this is probably
I think you're coming towards it.
Yeah, it is in my long-winded fashion I went with my quite enlightened stockman at the time, who caught a sense of what I was worrying about and thinking about, and he said, "Well, look, I think first thing we need to do is go with our animals to the abattoir." And it wasn't, I don't want to sound sanctimonious around that. I totally get why most people who live and breathe livestock farming find it incredibly hard to then be the person that takes them to slaughter. They often sell them as stores, so they're removed from that. If they've reared them, it's emotionally very tough. But so we went on the sort of 4 a.m. low blood sugar sort of tour of how that process works. And we're talking about a very small, very worthy local abattoir that still does all three of the main farm animals, as in you can take sheep, cow and pig there. Most of them have become single species and very much more industrial. And of course, it's the worst horror movie you've seen on an overdose of steroids. It's unbelievably, and I don't want to be a vegetarian, but I think what it really harnessed, which I think was in me, was, okay, if we're going to farm animals, we need to do a lot better. If in the exchange rate between taking life, these sentient, and the world's opening up to the sentience of things we've deliberately dumbed down sheep, cattle, pigs, to realising actually they're pretty complex emotional characters, and we need to do a lot better. And I think that was allowed the door to open, which I think had been in me but hadn't really had a direction.
Yes, yeah.
And so there we go. There's the longest answer to a question.
I've had longer. You won't believe it, but I had longer, and it's fine. No, I mean that's what an awakening, really. Possibly necessarily needed.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, it hasn't turned me into a vegetarian, but it just has allowed me to sort of work the prism of how we farm through a sort of, and we'll come on to it, but it's possible. I think the point is what farming faces is actually a cultural barrier, it's not an economic barrier. Most farmers will throw back at you they can't afford to do things, and of course in certain instances that is in fact true, like sheep hill farmers. It's not a way to make a living, but out here in the arable stretches of East Anglia, you can do it differently and do it better without, and actually that can be even more productive to your bottom line anyway than what you were doing before. So so it's been a journey.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned farming, Hugh. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do in terms of the farming side of some of the land that you have here at Somerleyton?
Yeah, well, I'm delighted to.
And also the other side of it, which we'll come on to, which is of course the rewilding, which I'm obviously very, very keen to learn more about.
Yeah. Well, okay, so first of all, it's been a gradual journey. I think that, I absolutely understand the sentiment of all farmers that I don't know why, but there's almost a biblical sense of purpose around all farmers around the harvest, bringing in, literally feeding the nation. That there is a motive and very personal, and the land that people farm, whether they're tenants, owners, or land owners, it is like the back of your hand. It's a very personal, emotive thing. And so for me to get to where we are now took a long time, because I had to change and eventually let go of people I'd worked and lived with for quite a long time. Yeah. And I understand that there's a huge barrier for generational, between families, but also between different parties. But I was very lucky in the sense that having had this very, so to set the context of Somerleyton, it's a 5,000 acre block. Yeah. And probably what's interesting for some of your viewers, which maybe not always obvious, is these estates, certainly any time prior to and including the industrial estates of the 19th century, were not bought to be particularly productive. They were bought with excess wealth that might have come from dynastic marriages or grace and favour from the king, for hunting, for sport, for entertaining. Houses like this were built for entertaining and showing off.
You've even, sorry to interrupt, you've even just put on display of your local house martins, I can hear.
Yes, I know. I worry about.
So thank you for that.
Well, I should have said house martins actually, but when we were talking about the seminal thing, was I worry about them more than anything. Are they coming back? Have we got the nests right? Are there enough nests? Why aren't there more here than there are in the north? But anyway, we can talk.
And I should say as well, thank you so much for dropping the nightingale off in the bushes just as I arrived at the accommodation last night. It was very, very kind of you.
Well, I actually also had to do a sense check. Well, maybe he's pulling my leg, and so I had to put up against a live recording of one online just to make sure that.
Just to make you all aware that genuinely I pulled into the gates last night, and as I wound the window down, there was a nightingale singing nearly metres away from the car, and it's the first one I've heard this year, and apparently it's not one you get.
Well, no, we haven't had really enough of that kind of dense scrub and wild space, which we'll come on to when we talk about rewilding. Sure, It's just been marginalised to the point that it hasn't been as attractive. So it's particularly nice to have someone, A, who can identify one, and B, that of all people, for you to hear it. But yeah, so 5,000 acre block.
Going back to your, yes.
I mean, and I think, the bit I was trying to say is that, so therefore, on a 5,000 acre block, it might be a surprise to some people that around 2,500 acres of that is farmland, as in arable farmland. Little bit more, but under 3,000. So quite a lot of it is not. People often think that it's all farmland. Yes. It isn't. In our case, we're a fairly traditional mixed farm, as in I mentioned earlier the River Waveney down to the west of us now. So there's a big stretch of grass, as well as the park grass and now the rewilded blocks we've got rich grassland on the classic floodplain marshes, which put up a lot of good grass. So we're lucky that we have that asset. There's around 1,000 acres of grass, so it's pretty productive for livestock. That's the point. And then if you think of the upland farm, the arable farmland is sort of, Rob's might show it to us tomorrow, but we've done a very good map of just the kind of light land farm. So we're talking about former heathland. A lot of Suffolk was made up of what they call the Suffolk sandlings. In Norfolk they talk about the brecks, but it's a sort of, used to be, before enclosure anyway, sort of common grazing land for probably thousands of years.
Yes.
Eventually became enclosed grazing land, and then only really after the First and then Second World War it got chopped up as we got chemicals and bigger horsepower to make it productive. It's not an irony that a lot of that land is now coming out of production, but anyhow, so we farm most of that, nearly all of it now in hand. So that's us farming in the way that it's changed. That it was lots of different tenants, and the reason for that is a smallish holding of 200 acres with the kind of big machinery, combines at over 300,000 to buy.
Yeah.
Tractors are over 100,000 to buy. Just over this from the 70s through to the 90s and noughties, gradually our tenants have given up, and so that then land has come back. And the consequence of that is it's allowed us to make that a profitable unit, because otherwise we would have been in the same position.
Yes.
So, so there's a light land farm where we still do what you might call, and this is a very crude line, but degenerative farming, in the sense of, if you care about soil, destoning, deep cultivation, irrigation, and potatoes, and to a certain extent sugar beet that come with that, or onions, is the kind of the devil of what you might call regenerative farming. However, it is also
a necessary.
Onions and potatoes are two of our key staples, and actually, you can be pious about sugar beet, but sugar is also, we should have it in moderation, but it is part of our diet. So on the light land, we still do that kind of farming, and we'll talk a bit about it, but we do try, and Rob is very good on this, mitigate as far as we can the impacts of those erosive farming methods in the periods. You have a 7-year cycle with potatoes. So in those intervening years, there's a lot of land healing that we try and do. And then on the stronger land, we're not a very heavy clay farm, but on the land that is strong enough for non-till, regenerative farming, it obviously really suits, first wheats, oilseed rape, peas, beans. And that is now, has been 5 or 6 or 7 years now with Rob, who will meet tomorrow, in a non-till system. And it is just, you wonder how we lost sight of this, because it is so compelling to see the soil rebuild under the ground, to see it kind of take the place of some of those chemicals that we've been using, particularly nitrogen is, and it's and to see that actually the inputs that we're putting into farming drop because the land is healing. I mean, it's so obvious. It's you wonder why people lost sight of it in the first place.
Because of course, even when I was a young boy, I can remember stubble fields over winter, and people used to burn the stubble, and we used to have. Certainly, I mean, we're only going back sort of 30 years, but I can remember seeing flocks of 50 to 100 lapwing in the field in the winter. Now, you don't see that anymore.
No. And I think, not least because the land that they're on is dead. It's not providing them with what they want, let alone everything else. So,
true.
So that's been, so I was very lucky through school, through kids at school, to meet Regen Rob, as we like to call him. I can say that on camera, but he slightly squirms when I say that.
Well, I mean, so do you want to explain to the viewer now, very briefly, a bit of an overview of what regenerative farming means? Or
I can do that. I mean, you might get a more.
And then we'll get more.
I tell you what, will be interesting to see if you get the same view.
Yes, I'll ask Rob in this video's case in a moment, but we'll give us your take.
Yeah, okay. So they're kind of
500 words or less.
Four kind of key principles. So if you like, old-fashioned farming has been all about opening up the soil. We believe that ploughing, for example, and deep cultivation, aerating the soil was good. It also breaks the weed cycle, helps kill off maybe crop-borne pests. Yes. So it's not like it was, and that goes right back to, in fact, Townsend and Cook of Holcombe and the four-course rotation. But it's become bigger and more industrial. And it's been around for a while, and in some cultures it's never been not around, but we're good at forgetting those. But the idea that actually soil is best left undisturbed and it can build. It's a bit like, I suppose, just thinking of the game of Jenga that most people have played. If you just take out all the blocks, the thing falls down. Well, that is what you're doing to soil all the time.
That's a very good analogy.
Through hard farming. Now, no one was doing it deliberately, and because you're damaging the soil, essentially the way to mend it was to actually use more and more drugs or chemicals, oil-based fertilizer, which is, so you're talking about, not only are they a derivative of oil, so you're looking at the kind of oil economy we're trying to move away from. So hey presto, suddenly people remembered that, as like you say, when we were kids, but to actually leave the soil to self-heal, it was better. So these direct drilling techniques and non-invasive techniques have become much more popular. And, obviously, you can't do it with potatoes. You can't do it with sugar beet. You can't do it with onions in the same way. So in addition to those, so non-disturbance is number one. Then the other one is using animals back in the rotation. So as farms became more industrial, more commercial, more single oriented, like I'm a wheat farmer, I'm a beef farmer, I'm a pig farmer. Obviously, as you'll remember, farms used to have all of those things in smaller quantities. So moving animals through the winter across your lighter arable land, lighter as in more sandy, so it doesn't get too disturbed by them. Eating a forage crop that is fixing nitrogen into the soil through the winter, so it's helping nourish the soil, it's feeding the animal, and it's providing a bit of late pollination for insects.
Yes.
Hopefully doing those three things. Eaten down slowly over winter, animals doing well across the winter, animals being outdoors in a more naturalistic way, so it's good for welfare. And and at the same time, then you're stopping soil get washed away, the top of the soil. So again, if you go back to that binary thing of taking everything away, it's a bit like, I don't know, just trying to think of a good analogy, but stripping milk of all the fat, which has become idea of healthy, but actually you're taking away almost everything that's good about the milk.
Yes, yeah. A bit like mowing a lawn as well, isn't it?
Yeah, taking off the top layer of nutrients.
If you mow a lawn continually through June, July, August, you get down to basically brown dust.
Yeah.
That the lawn never gets a chance to properly establish a root structure.
Yeah.
And naturally seed to fill in those gaps. So if you actually want a healthy lawn, the best thing you can do is to mow it on a higher setting, isn't it? And mow it less so that it can regenerate itself. Sorry, I digress. But
yeah. Well, it's exactly that. I mean, it's very obvious. I suppose the awful thing, like a lot of things, are incredibly obvious. When they become obvious, you just think, I cannot believe we've not been doing that.
Yeah.
And it looks amazing. It's amazing to have animals all out. I mean, I have memories of the late 70s of cattle being out, but they were all on maize by then, rather than anything interesting. But now they're all out, on the lighter land through the winter. We try and let them back off into a piece of woodland, so they can ruminate the woodland, and that's great for moving around the soil bed and the hopefully some of the the seed bed in the woodland.
Yes.
But they also can back off in harder weather. I know we don't get much of it, and that's sort of good for their welfare too. And then within that, of course, context is allowing more fallow, which is sort of there already, but more traditional fallows, maybe a grass lay that helps the ground recover for 2 or 3 years before it comes back into trying to... Now, what all that means, and this is the most compelling part of all, is that, and it helped that, we've had some pretty big spikes in the cost of fertiliser, particularly in the last few years. It's helped farmers make the binary decision, but
because a lot of the components for fertiliser comes from Eastern Europe, Ukraine, for example.
Yeah. So I mean, those spikes, I think £1,000 a tonne, was like terrifying for people and tipped some people into regenerative farming. But is that our input costs, and so this is mostly nitrogen, it has fallen by about, we haven't quite hit 50%. I think we're forecasting to get over it in the next couple of years. I mean, that's 50% over 2,500 acres is a shitload of money. I mean, it's so it's not a question of just, it is doing good, but it also is, you can't, so you'll probably know from farming, most of us hit yield plateaus. So after this post-war new industrial revolution, agricultural revolution, this brave new world of pouring the land with chemicals came about. It plateaued around, say, 2000 as an easy year, but in the late 90s into the 2000s, people just stopped increasing yield on their acreages because the soil's dead. It's relying totally on like a drug addict on the drug, and not on anything natural. So the way to increase your bottom line is not actually really by increased yield anymore. It's by reducing your inputs. Yeah. And you've got inputs: labour, machinery, and chemicals. I mean, that's 3 big inputs. So to be able to knock out 40 to 50% and maybe more is very compelling.
Yeah.
And so you've got this wonderful thing of saving time, saving carbon, saving money, and saving nature. And we can talk more about those. But we've said it a lot on Instagram: save time, save money, save carbon, save nature. If you begin to go into a more regenerative cycle, you begin to do all those things.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's kind of that's the layman's view of regenerative farming.
Brilliant. Yeah, so interesting with the regenerative farming. I think there's a parallel there with garden settings, if you ask me, because for years it was sort of driven into us that we had to use pesticides and herbicides. We had to have a pristine lawn.
Yeah.
We had to get rid of, kill your aphids now. There's a reason that dandelions are the symbol of a Weedol bottle, and that for me, it drives me insane. So much so that I formed a petition and got the RHS to remove all their double messaging that they had, because a few years ago they were still doing this whole, let your lawn grow long, while selling their own branded, slug pellets, and pesticides and things through the brand. So
do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have now stopped selling that stuff. I think there's probably still one or two things they vicariously sell for a few quid, but I'm not going to start a big dig at them today. But the point I'm making is it's been drilled into us for decades to have a pristine lawn, to have no aphids on our roses, and to basically drench our gardens in chemicals so that everything is perfect. And of course, you and I are now fighting to make people see, actually, you can have rougher edges. You can still have formality, but have function for wildlife as well. So I think there's a great parallel there.
Yeah. I kind of wonder about this, and I think you're right. I think if you were to bring it all the way back to thousands of years ago, that the way we have ended up managing land as farmers, until very recently anyway, and still a lot of farmers, but also, as you say, gardens and golf courses and school playgrounds is almost like a sort of an evolutionary hangover of when we really did live in a landscape of fear. I must push nature away because it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And the man now with the strimmer just mindlessly doing the outside, like the Council of Norfolk, I noticed today coming out in Britain, have just done the road verges. And of course there are times when road safety it should be the paramount thing, but actually most of it is just it's stuck in someone's budget. Oh, that's what we do, so we'll do it.
That's right.
Hedge cutting on farms is that, it's that day, so I'll go hedge cutting. Not, oh, maybe I don't need to hedge cut.
That's right.
And similarly, we'll
do it rotationally. Do one side one year, the top the next.
Yeah, and so it's a cultural thing that one's trying to sort of overcome. And here, we it's interesting that what I'm looking at right now into this very formal parterre. You probably can notice we've let the banks go wild, so to speak. It's a little contribution. And actually what's been interesting is that started out as fairly, just singularly grass. And now there's these sort of big, oversized anthills, which, and you could argue it's getting to the point where we might have to reconsider because it's getting maybe too informal. But the point is actually it also provides a lovely landscape change between the formality and the informality. And I think I would say to anyone that once you, like most things actually, once you try them or once you break out of what it's maybe the way you bake or the way you're used to doing any number of the routine tasks we all do subconsciously and consciously all the time, is if you, and we're not good at this, humans, allow yourself to, I might try something different.
Yeah.
Generally, it's easy once you start, and you kind of wonder why you didn't beforehand. But it's just the starting that's so difficult.
Well, that's right. And half the time, it's, you go into a garden centre, you'll buy what's there. So if you've got a garden centre full of, fastigiate yew and rhododendrons, you'll buy that and put it in the garden if they've got an offer on. If you go into a garden centre or visit the Wild Your Garden online shop, sorry, then of course, then you're going to be, sometimes you might be presented with a few wildflowers and think, oh, that field scabious would look really nice in my lawn, or that lesser knapweed will do really well in the edges of my lawn or something. And those oxeye daisies are pretty much, well, they are a leucanthemum. They're just a native and not these sort of big blousy leucanthemums that we buy for our herbaceous borders. Why don't I try them? Like I've got, my borders at home have got teasels, red campion, oxeye daisy, and these sorts of things in them, because to me they're just as good looking as a salvia, an echinacea, and a peter, that sort of thing. So a lot of the time it's what's put in front of us. It's the same as if you go into a restaurant, isn't it? You eat what the options are. So it's about pushing those boundaries, and I think by having these kind of longer grassy areas, you're getting people to think, and I think a lot of it is a generational thing, sort of the younger generation coming up today, even below me, Hugh. There are a few of them. They are, they're seeing climate change, they're seeing the insect declines, they're more open-minded towards these principles or these catastrophes, if you look at it like that, than a lot of, say, folk who might be of an older generation who are stuck in their own way. Equally, I get people coming to me and saying, or emailing me saying, I've just hit my 70s and I can't believe I've been doing this for decades. I should have done this, I should have done what I'm now doing decades ago. So it's about changing people's perception of what a garden or a formal landscape should look like, I think, particularly our parks and green spaces as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's also good that people, I think sometimes when something becomes too radicalised, people run away from it. And of course, understanding that even a little contribution, a little change is better than nothing. And it usually leads to, that wasn't so bad, I can do a bit more. That's right. I mean, when we started messaging around, Wild East and a charity, I think some people read it as, you must do this. Yeah. And if you're not, you're a bad person. And of course, that was not at all what we wanted to convey. No. And it can get a bit like that with the conservation generally, as in you're either a George Monbiot radical or you're a stuck in your ways sort of arable farmer who actually thinks it's a bit sissy to even think about nature, let alone help it.
Yeah.
And you are one of those two binary things. And of course, actually, one of the great things for me is the sort of feckless wilder who had read Feral all those years ago, and with Rob, who's live or die farmer, albeit of a regenerative order, is that he's helped. I think we've both helped each other. He's softened perhaps around what we call wild edges within the farm landscape and the kind of the rewilding, and opened his mind to all that stuff. But he's also shown me that we can still be productive and do things really well from a farming and farmer's point of view, but produce a really solid crop for the nation.
Which is key, because of course you and I would love to see the entire nation wall to wall of woodlands, scrub, long grass, meadows, wetlands, but we've got to feed ourselves. We've got to be realistic, and you and I both know that. But of course, there are two sides to every story, or often more. And I think a lot of people, particularly from a farming background, would say, "Oh, you lefty woke, wilding idiots don't have a first clue about it," and I don't, I've never grown a crop of wheat. I don't know what kind of pests and diseases that farmers are faced with just to make ends meet and to make a living at the end of the day, because they are making a living. That's what we've got to remember. It's a way of life. It's not just something nice to do at the weekend. It's not easy being any farmer, is it?
No, and I think also one of the things that certainly I feel, and I think I've talked to Rob quite a lot about, is that it's an invisible subconscious thing lurking just beneath the surface with farmers, all farmers. I mean, literally all farmers, and more in some areas than others, like, upland hill farmers particularly, but even down here. The fact is, if you take out subsidy, and, global agriculture is subsidised, that's a normal thing. It's the way it is. But it does leave one a little bit uneasy, because the business you're running fundamentally, without subsidy, it doesn't work. Yeah. And so if you're a widget maker, or you sell bread in a shop in the street, or do what you do, you kind of have a bottom line, you try and make 10%, maybe you aim for 15 or 20 or whatever it is. But there's an uneasiness in farming, I think, which causes some of the brittleness around, being told what to do. Is that, we all know that we are kind of beholden to the taxpayer by way of subsidy, as in it literally doesn't work without that. And that is... no one really wants to be like that. It's much better. No. It'd be much nicer to think that actually I can make money, and therefore I could give some back.
Yes.
By way of leaving a bit of land, or being a bit kinder to certain things. I don't know if other people feel like that, but I certainly, I think I have unearthed that is some of the brittleness and uneasiness in the farming community is because broken down, it's a sort of it's subsidised, and it's not a true income in the way that any other free marketeer can say, I am making money genuinely.
That's it.
Anyway, but that's aside.
Well, I mean, so yes, I'd like to come on to kind of a bit more of the financial detail, and in particular, obviously, you're not just doing farming. That's the point of this interview and my visit today. Is obviously there are parts of the land you are rewilding very successfully, and again, we're going to see some of those shortly with Rob. But going back for a second, just stepping back a touch. What for you have been some of the major declines over your lifetime that you've seen, or anything that you've noticed? I mean, we mentioned the lapwing earlier, in perhaps response to the intensification of agricultural practices on your land. Have you lost any species of bird in particular, or is there anything you've noticed?
Yeah,
there may not be. It may have already been, at a point when you started to realise and gain that consciousness, after that sobering visit to, the abattoir, that actually the degradation had already set into a point by then. But
well, when we started Wild East, we we were all kids of the 70s, me, Ollie, and Argus, and so we we were looking back to the 70s, and everyone now knows the obvious sort of windscreen splat thing of insects. Life
splat
and
effect,
that probably is the easiest denominator that anyone can remember.
Yeah.
In terms of Somerleyton in particular, I suppose, as again, a child of that era, the area that we are rewilding, and I mentioned the Suffolk sanding, which was heathland.
Yeah.
So in terms of heathland birds, I mean, when we were young, and I'm not saying I was particularly conscious of this, but there were still red squirrels, there were, at night, nightjar, nightingale, woodlark, I suppose, redpoll in the pine, and now this is not necessarily just to do with climate and change, but obviously the heathland was planted deliberately after the First World War, and then incrementally since then. So it went from being this fairly open, heathland to a closed canopy where bracken became the dominant floral plant, closing out light, and of course therefore seed and insects and these things. So it is also an accident of and it's quite commercial forestry, I suppose you'd say, single crop.
Yes.
So they are very noticeable in their disappearance. In the same way, they're a bit like you mentioned, lapwing, redshank, and other marshland birds along the river. I'm pleased to say are still or have come back a lot since we've changed practice.
Great, yeah.
But I think probably the easier thing, I always think of having an imaginary animation of a kind of bird, not rather than just a bird table, a bird life table of just trying to show that shifting baseline of, even I can remember a bird table in winter just hopping with all birds, competing and or not for food. And now you're really pleased when you get a one or two here and there, and they're probably tits. I mean, rather than anything too exotic. So I think, and I've obviously read around a lot of it now. So there were always starlings in the bamboosery in the garden, and you could walk in at night and they just all go bang.
Yes.
Now when you see a murmuration down the marsh, it might be 200 or 300 strong, but it's just a moment of great joy, which used to be just a moment.
Yes.
And now it's a thing to hold on to and celebrate.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned house moderns. It's great that they're still here. You would have thought the landscape that we've created in the last sort of particularly 10 years has more insect life as an insect feeding bird, but we haven't. There were always swallows as well as house martins and swifts. We haven't really had swallows back on the house and around the. They are around, but not around here.
Yes,
and I'm always putting out callers and trying to.
Yes.
I suppose it's important to also say that we don't really want them, but there's been a huge build-up of deer.
Yeah.
I guess because they're less keepered than they used to be, and they've just grown by population, which is nice to see.
No natural predators, are there?
No, nice to see.
I don't think we're getting the
and also all the birds of prey
anytime soon.
No, I mean, wouldn't it be great to have a lowland, a lynx? To take out some of the deer, particularly the Asian deer that arguably shouldn't be here. But one must remember also that red kites, buzzards, marsh harriers are all a very common sight now. Some people would say too common, but the fact that they're here suggests there's a food source and which is healthy, and they were not around. So there have been
Yes.
successes. We can't pretend that.
Yeah, Marsh Harrier in particular, I know have really done very well in the last
Yeah.
couple of decades, and it's great to see them booming. The red kite continues to spread, as you say, and some species are doing okay. I mean, for me, I'm slightly biased, but butterflies are always a good barometer.
Yeah,
And the fact that you perhaps once on that heathland may have had the silver-studded blue, which of course is in Norfolk, on sort of different heathers, bell heather and things.
Well, I'll make sure some of the stats come out when we join Rob, because actually there's a wonderful girl in the office, Michelle, who's married to one of the farm guys who looks after all the recorders.
Oh, brilliant.
And there is a butterfly guy. There's a even more dedicated moth guy, and he's trying to get to 1,000 species of moth recorded. I think about 850 or something, which seems incredible. And there is a lot of record, and one has to be careful that, of course, there was a period when there wasn't really any recording going on, not specifically here.
Yeah.
And some of these things are because of big movements, like you can get a bad butterfly year that's just climatically bad.
Yes.
And then there's obviously within that the declines because of change, and one has to be
and
a little bit
cycles,
nuanced.
Parasitic wasps, that sort of thing. So there's all sorts at play, isn't there?
Yeah, we haven't had a recording of an adder or a common lizard in the wild block, which is in this last 7 years that we've been recording yet. Doesn't mean that we haven't got them, but we haven't. We've seen obviously slow worms and grass snakes pretty abundantly, but that's another thing that was definitely around. We were worried about adders when I was a child. You'd be pushed to worry about being bitten by an adder now because you just don't see them. But
so a general decline. That's more than I expected you to say, actually. But of course, it's great that you've got these kind of historic records and you've been able to monitor the land over several decades, and in particular quite intensively now that you are doing what you're doing, which leads me perfectly into what you are doing, Hugh, which is of course rewilding chunks of your 5,000 acres. So what kind of a percentage, and obviously I don't think I need to ask you why you're doing that, because of course we've just been speaking about it for the entirety of this interview so far. But I mean, what kind of percentage and what kind of things have you been doing to encourage more wildlife back in?
Well, the thing that I would just quickly say, you're right, we have been saying why in lots of circular ways, but actually the why that I always try and say on interview, and which I think anyone can hold on to, is actually this simple idea of a debt to nature. In the sense that we all, as consumers, farmers, gardeners, and by the way, not often with, I'm not saying there's guilt necessarily, because most people have done that without really consciously thinking, I want to destroy anything. But nevertheless, we have all been complicit in a catastrophic decline, and that debt is what I seek to repay. And I think that's the easiest thing for everyone to morally get on board with in some small way. Here, so we've got two very different things outside of the regen farming. One of the things we have done, and I'm also keen to point out that we took the area around Fritton Lake, where you're staying and where we're going to go around later, was part of that kind of Suffolk Soundings heathland. When my father was a child, it was all open, still grazed by sheep. Wow. Of course, there were trees, but an alder around the edge of the lake, but it was pretty open. Yeah. So our rewilding is fundamentally a kind of heathland restoration project, if you want to bring it down to a type of landscape. Yes. And it is also, and I'm very conscious of this, is that so the lake itself is a pretty valuable reservoir for local water supply. So the less, they've always been keen on less agriculture, less runoff, less chemical pollution of the lake, which is obviously really bad in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And it locks, the phosphates get locked up in the mud. And so there's 2 or 3 different things, but the water company and generally the Environment Agency would love to stop farming in its catchment completely. I'm not in control of all of that. So that's one reason, to better water quality. But it is also some of the worst land that I own. So in terms of agricultural production, we talked about the chemicals coming in a little bit between the wars, but really after the Second World War, allowed us to make poor land productive with subsidy. And so those areas around the lake weren't really farmed until the 50s anyway. And then they become farmed for either timber or for crop. Yes. But in a world with hotter and drier springs, mercifully it's been cool this spring, but it's been another very dry spring in the last 6 weeks. So that kind of land is very marginal, and the subsidy is a change, and I support that. So rather than just getting paid to produce anything, it's a bit more nuanced. So it was quite an own goal for me if I was going to take land out to support rewilding around the lake, is the right place for the reservoir, the right place because it's my least productive land. And critically, and I'm happy to admit this, I'm extremely lucky that it is also in where I have my core tourism operation. So people are interested, particularly eco-anxious, the urban majority are keen. NEP has shown that people are keen to see this kind of restoration. So the fact that Fritton Lake tourism lies inside of that is very neat for me. If it was just a piece of land somewhere over there, it just would have a lot less credence. So I'm very lucky that those three things came together. But it's 1,000 acres. That includes 150 acres of water, about 350 or so different types of woodland that we're opening up and trying to make more naturalistic and allow more glades and space for the floral diversity to recover and grazing to occur, and then slowly the arable land, as you'll see tomorrow, is recolonizing gorse and birch and broom and becoming what
now
it once
we're talking,
was.
Hugh.
Yeah, so
exciting landscape.
Yeah, so in the end, it will. I think what's different to someone like NEP, I suppose, as the example people probably have seen, is that is all very heavy boulder clay.
Yeah.
And so stuff wants to grow. That is like having steroids. For those who don't understand soil, everything wants to grow out of clay, and nothing wants to grow out of sand, really.
No.
So it's a slow game, and
I was particularly pleasantly surprised to find out that my entire garden is well drained sandy soil. So me being used to having clay gardens in the past, this is a exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, kidney vetch and small scabious and Viper's bugloss open up, and I'm like, exciting. So it's
well, I mean, it is really great to see.
Me,
Yeah, well, it is great to see that. I mean, I think one has to be really careful to remember the change. But where we have opened up some of the woodland, where we've had pigs disturbing the ground, really eating the bracken roots. They love eating bracken roots in the winter when there's nothing else to eat, and that weakens it. And incrementally, and it's slow, and there's a lot to do. But where grass is initially, or cross-leaved heath, is just recolonizing through seedbed disturbance.
Yeah.
And it will take the rest of my time for two things to happen. One, for it to get the woodland to be less like woodland, and more naturalistic and more of a grazing woodland, wood pasture, if you like. And it will take also that time for the ex-arable to become really good scrub, as in dense scrub, like you might see at NEP.
For nightingales, for example.
For nightingales, and we are not averse, I might say, knowing where we want to go, to introducing some of those things. Yeah. We put some boxes of pens of some of those heathland species in, because we know that they were there and we want to see progress. So that's the Rolls-Royce part, and in that we have not many pigs right now, actually, because as you know, you can have too many pigs quite quickly.
Yeah.
But
they're great rotivators.
Yeah, ponies and Highland cattle. Highland, mainly because it's such a light land place, they do well on that kind of scrubby ground. I mean, the national favourite, again, I think most people copy NEP, of having English Longhorn, which is a wonderful animal, but is a really big beef animal that's been bred to be a big beef animal. It just won't do well on that ground. It won't make up the weight that we need them to. So. And we used to have Highlands when I was young, and they're a good-looking crew, actually. So I'm happy about that. So that's.
And what's your take on the belted Galloways? Have you got any of those, or have you had?
No, I have had them in the past, and obviously they're very. I saw some recently walking in the Pennine Way,
and gorgeous looking.
They are. I mean, they're the kind of ones you want on your toy farm. And I would have. I mean, I'm not too species biased. I mean, as in if there was some.
I'm not saying one is better than the other, but
no. So we wanted something as a point of difference, and I historically we had Highlands as a sort of flying herd doing all the rough ground in those days. So it was a nod to that and to my dad, but also, but it didn't have to be them, as you say. It could have been another. And I suppose the other point of difference from some of the other projects is we decided we've already got quite a big deer population we do try and manage, but we decided, because they are already using the whole estate, and this estate, if you go up in a drone 1,000 feet, say, you've got the Waveney Valley to the west, which is pretty bleak and open. I mean, it's green, but it's not a place for deer.
No.
And if you go east, you get fewer and fewer hedges, and then Lowestoft, Yarmouth and the sea. It's pretty bleak farmland off our patch. And so we're a bit of a melting pot. So if something's lost or looking for a mate, or and it finds us, then tends to stay here. We gather deer like a sort of bee to nectar, and so we didn't really want to shut them out of the wild block. So we actually stock fenced it rather than deer fenced it. So they're allowed to come out and use it as they always did, and. Yeah, so that's a Rolls-Royce project, and there are lots of introductions I'd like to do. I'd love to have beavers in the lake, but it's pretty controversial out here where most of the marshes of the river valleys of East Anglia are underwater already, under sea level.
Yes.
So there is that risk. Maybe it will come, maybe there'll be a guerrilla rewilder who will drop them in for me. Everyone will point at me, but if it isn't me, I'd love to be able to go to court and say, look, it actually wasn't me.
Maybe Derek Gow will lend a hand there.
Even Derek's become a bit establishment now, you see. He used to be. But But, night herons, we've got a white stork release project. I'd love to see those suite of birds that we talked about and some of the invertebrates and other mammals coming back, in bigger numbers. I'm not averse to reintroducing them, but I think I am quite red-blooded on the fact that, like, ponies are a good part of the grazing system, but as nippers, a bit like we've got Soay sheep here, if you can have Soay sheep that go into the English food chain, along with cattle, I would definitely keep a few ponies because everyone loves seeing them. Yeah. But a lot of the wilding projects have allowed ponies to breed too fast, and they're sending them to France. That's fine. I don't have a moral objection to that, but as a project that needs to make money and that the subsidies might change, the long term it has to be productive for meat. Yeah. Alongside nature. Otherwise it's a bit of a rich man's game, and I'm kind of keen to. So we're going to be biased towards if I can get up to 40 breeding Highland cows with 1 or 2 years of followers at any one time. That's when it's fully functioning, that's a good number, and a viable contribution to making it sustainable alongside a bit of timber and a bit of tourism and hopefully some grants. But we can't. One thing that's not predictable at all anymore is the grant landscape. Of course, in Britain. Yeah. I think the other thing, just to quickly mention though, is it's easy for, and I mentioned earlier that it's most farms are made up of just farmland, and most people are making a living out of just that farmland. I think what everyone can do, and I'm quite militant about this, is in a save time, save money, save carbon. If you take these flagstones, in fact, as a classic field system, they're all different shapes and sizes. Yes. Some of them are a bit bent and off centre, and generally, apart from maybe some of the fens that where they were sold kilometre blocks, that's kind of how the English landscape is all over, whether it's dry soiled, walled, or hedge. They're not square often, they're not the same. And if you're looking at it from the environmentalist point of view, which is what we did as a charity at the very beginning, is we just measured this fantasy number. We should have actually made it fantasy wilding, like fantasy football, everyone would have loved that. But if you take 10, if we just said, look, if every farmer, forget the size of the farm and the size of the field, but if you took an average, gave 10 metres crop to crop, that would return 75,000, I'm going to say acres, but it might be hectares, I can't remember, but 5%, this is just in the Wild East, back to nature, and it's an existing nature highway. That is a network. Yeah. But most of that network is depleted, as in people generally for the last 50 years have farmed much too close, and farmed in the sense of cutting, maybe getting spray drip. So it's ploughed right up to the hedgerows, rather than having those marginal strips, which are, as you say, those essential corridors for insects. Yeah, it's like birds, a really mammals, reptiles to move through. Yeah, you want to get 1970s shaggy. This is where we're aiming at. My friend was always trying to liken it to kind of waxing, which is of course now a man's thing as well. But it's just too manicured. And I can't say I've ever put my hand to that. No, but if you anyway, so that was looking at the environment, but then allowing those depleted resources to become kind of humming, buzzing cathedrals to biodiversity. It's a huge acreage, when you look at it, a lineal acreage. Yeah. If you then flip that coin to the farmer, we all farm big machinery, and if your spray boom is the governing device in your field system, whether it's 8 metres, 16 metres, 32 metres, there will always be land that doesn't fit in that block. And what we've spent the last 20 years doing is nudging along, trying to get that last corner, backing up, turning. And what happens is, first of all, it takes time. Secondly, you're pouring more carbon onto the field and fuel through taking more time. So that's carbon again. You're probably overspraying because you then hit the hedge. So you're stifling nature or regulating growth. And it's costing money, as in time, the guy doing it. Yeah. if you just simplify that to just going up and down the field within the blocks, those wild edges that I'm looking at from the environmentalist point of view become, oh my God. And where Rob is really good, and you'll get this from him tomorrow, if you are really scientific about that, that's time saving in field. You farm better in the main area of the field, and you don't drop yield, because you don't really get yield on the edge anyway.
No.
Because it's in the shade, or there's a big oak tree,
under a tree,
or it's been competing with other things.
Yes.
So if everyone, and I think it's important to say that in the farming community, there is no reason for every farmer in the country to do that, even if it's just one bit here or there. And the obvious way to do it is along boundaries, like me and you as farmers. We can do it together, or a footpath and a boundary, because then it helps the public. Now, lots are, but also lots aren't.
Yeah.
And that idea of so that's what we've done here, and we are slowly doing it across the farm. And it is slow, because I don't want to give up too much land too quickly. But we are aiming to end up with around 5, 6, 7% of the area taken out into those permanent what we call wild edges. So it's in-field wilding.
Yes.
It's just an important message, because rather like in your garden, most gardeners want a straight lawn, but they could leave the edge.
Yeah,
or most farmers want a straight field, but they could leave the edge.
Yeah.
And it's only culture that's standing in their way. It's not money. And I think that's I'm quite militant on that point. I mean, of course, different scales is different for different people, but if you take it as an average, it's culture is the barrier, not finance.
Because I mean, farming now in the UK has got to the point where we'll move on to a very different topic in a moment, but one that's very close to your own heart. In fact, your cap suggests everything. But there's farmers I know that are now bringing in beehives, so to help Asian bees to pollinate the crops that they need to harvest. And whereas if you had those buffer strips, you would encourage the insect life to then pollinate your own crops, not need to bring non-native invasive species in, which are aggressive, which do push out local bumblebees in particular, and the whole system would be a better fit for the landscape. But yes, that's almost a topic for another day. But that's the point.
I mean, it's sort of madness, really.
I mean, they're already hand pollinating apple trees in China because there aren't enough bees and insects to do it.
If that's not a barometer of how catastrophic things are,
exactly.
then that's the ultimate. I think they do it in California as well, don't they? They move bees around. There are lots of bee lorries moving bees around, and that's a crazy place.
Yeah, I need to do a video on beekeeping, because there's a few points I'd like to make, but I won't make them today. But anyway, I've just touched on them briefly. But let's move on to something very close to your own heart, Hugh. And the cap, if you can't see from there, says Wild North. Well, we're not in the north anymore, Hugh.
No,
you've not even changed your cap since you're back from the Pennine Way.
No, I wanted to make the point that we're now Wild Kingdoms, and so I'm taking a stab at where. So I suppose
Wild Kingdom, I should say, is how we were introduced.
Exactly.
Hugh got in touch and said, hey,
well, it's
got this project.
Well, you are literally the living embodiment of what we've been trying to tell people to do. You're actually doing, so it's sort of rather nice. So I suppose Wild East, as I say, I can wear that tomorrow. But it came about really, and I must, I can tip my cap to Ollie and Argus, are not here, but two great friends, both genuinely eco-anxious farmers. And we got together. I think I sort of went to see them individually, and actually Argus always tells the story that he, I think at the time, had what was a minor but quite was in hospital for a bit, so he was at a sort of low ebb and read the manifesto, and it kind of seduced him. And I think Ollie actually was sort of going through a divorce, so they always now reference these points that they were caught off guard, and if they should have said no. But I think where we found common ground is that I could, as a man of relative privilege, I could just kind of carry on practicing, the sort of things we've been talking about to do in the farmed and garden environment, patting myself on the back and getting the odd award maybe. And maybe having the odd school group, but actually this is a societal problem, and I suppose this is a really critical point. It's a societal solution, and that you can't have nature recovery, conservation, whatever you want to call it, right the way back to the beginning of the Wildlife Trust and the National Trust and the National Park movement in the really the 50s and a bit longer for National Trust, but has been about too few people in too few places. And we have been guilty, all of us, of turning it into a kind of slightly chocolate bossy, as in you go and visit nature over there, you go and visit nature,
Yes,
and then you
yeah.
come back and ruin it over here. And people have been quite happy with that sort of dichotomy. And that we all need to be David Attenboroughs, and we all need to be a wildlife trust in our own space, however small that is. Because, and I think this has got to be right. That if anything, I think it was Jacques Cousteau or his father's son who said, we protect what we love. And I mean, if you don't love something in your immediate landscape, however that might be, then you can't outsource this stuff. It's got to be from here and immediately. So that was kind of the start, and we were really inspired. I would just give them a name check, but American Prairie Reserves is a similar charity in America, in Montana country, doing something quite similar from ground up. And like the best of the Americans, when they are in good form, they don't seem to be particularly at the moment, but there's a real energy that comes with that. And they would just go, you just got to go for it. And we were saying, do you wonder about the map's a bit big? And they said, oh, can't, England's just so small, you just don't be ridiculous. Nature needs space and scale. We still shied away from doing kingdom from the beginning, which is why, as Men from the East, we started with Wild East. But the idea was and remains simple, and it's been a checkered journey really, but it's to provide a platform, in this case a map, for people to celebrate
the
and
map
share
of dreams,
what they were doing in their environments, simply to inspire and other people to do the same. Because we know, that yes, I came across so many great examples of this along the Pennine Way, of people who do something, whether it's just because they like having flowers, or whether it's because they care what people think, or whether it's because they're rewilders or nature lovers. It doesn't really matter too much, but they're doing stuff. Yeah. But you can look at a typical row of houses anywhere, and there'll be someone doing something incredible. But most of them are tarmacked over, soffits are closed up on the house, it's hermetically sealed from nature. People have come too human and too divorced from what it even feels like to let nature into your kind of soul. And I think we were always romantic in that regard, and stick by that. What makes it difficult when it comes to funding is that we as you know from farming, particularly, is people will do it, but they'll only do it for money. And so we've had to monetize nature, and I totally accept that principle, but it doesn't mean that it should not sit alongside us reconnecting, because if we continue to develop as humans along more and more a very vain, introverted, single species sort of thing, which you kind of see on television and in like say the worst, funny sometimes, but the worst end of sort of TV, kind of literally plastic people who are so devoid from any connection with anything to do with the natural world. Then there is only one way that ends, and that's why everyone's obsessing with going to Mars, is because it's ironic that we could fix our own planet. Yeah. And I think then you couple that up with, I've read a lot now, and I'm sure you have, around, those very suppressed indigenous peoples from wherever who have been singing this song all the way through their existence and all the way into our existence, and now finally being listened to by white Western Christian governments around the world. How do we manage fires? Well, by the way, the natives, indigenous people of Australia know how to manage fires because they've been doing it for 10,000 years. It's only white man who's forgotten. And I think it's pretty embarrassing and difficult for the kind of extreme end of capitalism to own the problem, accept that it's entirely our responsibility, and to rebalance, to coexist. I think it's very, very difficult. It's a bit like, I don't know, learning a completely new. We got a tennis coach here, and having to relearn the kind of new Alcaraz top spin forehand when I can hit a perfectly good flat one is mind-bendingly difficult. And
I'll take your word for it.
Anyway, so I think what we realised is that there are loads of people doing incredible stuff, unsung heroes on all scales that we wanted to capture. Unfortunately, not everyone is media savvy and friendly and isn't shy about coming onto the map. But gradually, there's a momentum, and that's kind of what all we set out to achieve, is to imagine this map of dreams that might begin to tip a bit society to think differently, to coexist, to become less, not less human, but not become too human, to allow in themselves to even just have a 360 vague view of how we interact with nature and why it's important and what we've lost.
I have this horrible vision that, in 50 years' time, people are going to be putting on a headset and walking through a 3D, implemented wildflower meadow because
because you don't. The real one is like spooky. And I think, but I think also to say that I'm the first to own the fact that although it might have been in me somewhere, and I've been incredibly lucky to live in a place where it's sort of all around me, the first to admit that probably it wasn't until, my second half of my 30s after I'd come home and I began to explore this thing, and then I read a load of stuff, and then I visited lots of places and sucked up lots of information from people like you, but it's so, it's not, but I don't, and it's important people that I am authentic now, but I was absolutely living the same life as everyone else. As Laura will tell you, I was buying Dame Pat Bill Bacon, the devil in a sense of commercial pig farming, and all sorts of other unsavoury things when she met me as a 36-year-old or whatever I was. So I say that because it is to illustrate it can people can change, right?
Of course,
I'm absolutely.
But as I said earlier, people will email me in their 70s and go, "I've seen the light," I now don't put heavy into my lawn, and that's what it's all about.
And it's and I think there needs to be a radicalism. I don't think it always is the right thing. To be too kind of Extinction Rebellion, but I think that it is urgent, and urgent in a societal sense, and urgent in a natural catastrophe sense, and climate change sense. But I think they're not really. I think they're inseparable, and I think people miss the societal element. As in, if you go, I've been to lots of schools. I'm sure you have, and some people say, "Oh, the kids have got this." But when you see what they're doing and the amount the school is doing, it's very sweet and encouraging that they're doing something. But usually it's so infinitesimally small, and their knowledge is so infinitesimally small that you're thinking, my God, it's great that you're doing something, but how sad that it's so little. I mean, they've got 5 acres that hasn't been built on the edge of Lowestoft. They could be doing something. I said, look, I'll bring my pigs. We'll rip this up in no time. And you can see what nature will give you without you having. And And I don't want to sound unkind, but there's always a reminder for every good person you see. There's loads of reminders that most people are on rung 1 of the ladder, or not on it at all. That's just the reality we live in, and don't give it enough time, and haven't allowed themselves to adjust. Even most of the people who talk to me say, "Oh, I love it." The radio interview yesterday was saying, "God, I'm so inspired by the dreams. She's a great broadcaster. I'd love to go and see what she's actually doing." There are loads, as you said earlier, most people are lookers, or watchers, not doers. And I think David Waters down at the Busted project we were talking about is absolutely right, that if the movement can have an impact, it's creating more doers rather than more watchers, and that's kind of what you're doing. So it's a great thing, and we're at the beginning of a project. We've been sorely tested because what it actually needs, Wild Kingdom now, is fundamentally funding to accelerate the communication of the map, and to get people more, like anything that you're trying to build. And it's hard to get people to say, well, how do I measure I get it, how do I measure success? Well, the number of people singing literally about nature on the Map of Dreams, that's the metric. But what about the number of trees planted? Because they've all been told, a bit like, don't eat beef, do eat beef, do plant trees, don't plant trees. The people have got the tree planting message. No matter that most of them die, and no one comes to check them.
That's right.
As long as they've been planted, they feel like, I've done my bit. But the bit is the missing part of conservation is conversation in the sense of media, and until we all build it into our everyday, and it becomes something we don't need to talk about, that's what success looks like, and we're light years away from that, I'd say.
Yes, and I believe so strongly in your mission, Hugh, that I actually turned down an interview on BBC Breakfast to go and talk about No Mow May this morning to come here. So that's how much I believe in Hugh's mission. So
well, really I am very flattered by that.
The fact they got in touch yesterday is irrelevant.
No. Well, actually, funny enough, one of the things that came to me, I don't think I got the heart to sing it, but I think I sent my poor wife lots of rambles when I was walking, because Will and I walked the Pennine Way recently, and we were kind of walking. Sometimes I was behind him, sometimes we were together, but there was quite a lot of time alone, which is part of the reason for doing it. And I did, funny enough, I was thinking about No Mow May, and ended up somehow rewording that Row, Row, Row Your Boat. What's I don't know what song it is. It's a school song of some kind.
Yeah.
With No, 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 You Don't. And it was a kind of No, No, May thing. And I said, Laura, shit, I think I've got the perfect thing. Because we're always thinking about how to popularise nature. Well, there are two ways.
Yeah.
One is through music and one is through sport, because these are the things that young people live through, and gaming, but those two are more, and getting the people from within those sectors to allow for their lyrics to be repurposed for nature.
Yes,
It was something I'd love to do, but anyway, it's funny that No May. Of course, when we came out here today, we were mowing, so
no, but formal gardens kind of a necessary evil, isn't it? In places, But it's that mosaic. That's what I've always banged on
and actually,
about.
mowgrass is good. I mean,
mowgrass is great. You know, starlings will visit it because they'll then feed on the leather jackets that are within it. You know, and a mown lawn promotes the regeneration of things like your dandelions, your daisies, your red clover, your birdsfoot trefoil, your self-heal, all the stuff that's going to flower for longer, therefore providing more nectar for the insects if it's cut, rather than just let it go to seed and then that's it for the year. So there are merits to having a mown lawn, and I've talked about it in many videos.
I think it's a mindlessness that you attach to it when you see particularly councils and schools, and where it's just it's Thursday the 3rd, so I've got to go and do the verges, when actually that's another cultural thing. It doesn't if it doesn't need to happen.
For sure,
and it's repositioning the reasoning. Well, we're mowing this roundabout because there's an excellent black spot, but we can leave the middle.
That's right.
And it's just building that in. It's extraordinarily challenging just to have that conversation. We try to do it with our village green. Why don't we leave the outside? Because it's a council school. Yeah. And anyway.
Yeah, no, the No May is interesting actually. As I'm not quite sure that the researcher that got in touch with me from the BBC knew my full view on No May, because my actual view on No May is quite different to what most people's is, which think it's a great idea, and I think in principle it's a great idea, but the trouble is that Plant Life have never moved away from that No May, and I contacted them. I had to lengthy discussions with them about saying, look, you can't just do No May and let it bloom in June, knee high in July and all this. You've got to. So I came up with the hashtag No Mow Summer, because the trouble is, you go cutting you leave your lawn for May, then everybody thinks, right, get the mower out in June and raise it to the ground. Whereas, all that invertebrate life that's then moved in, it is wiped out. So actually, if you're not going to do No Mow May for any longer than the month of May, don't bother. Is my honest opinion, because it's providing that false sense of security for wildlife for it to then be mown down a month later. So. Yeah, that's me going off on a tangent. But since the No Mow May came up, I thought.
There's a book that a local author wrote, who I know a bit, or I grew up a bit with, but called The Easternmost House, and she lived in a house that's now fallen in the sea, just over there. Okay. Yeah. So it's a sort of diary of her last year, but she'd obviously read about rewilding and did get in touch. But there's this rather nice bit where and this is the point of making, is that. In her garden, that she is obviously too small to have actual animals in it, like a pig or a goat or a sheep or a cow. And so how do you mimic kind of, if you like, the patina of a naturally grazed landscape, where you do get very short grass, where you get sheep hitting it hard, but also you get torn grass from cows and then rootle ground by pigs. And so she sort of got her fork and her clippers, and she sort of was crawling around her garden trying to implement a little bit of an area which was like sheep, so really tightly taken down, and then a kind of tussocky area where the pigs had obviously broken the top of it, and then tearing with her leather gloves at the longer grass to try and get the kind of cow tear. Absolutely exhausting sounded, but rather lovely. And of course that's the point, is it's nuance and complex, and if you try and put it in a box, it immediately is wrong for someone. And of course the chaos of the natural system is what people were so frightened of, and all of our land management has been to box that shit down so it's not frightening and more productive or more organised, and allowing oneself to take your foot off the accelerator and accept a bit of nuance. Like ragwort is the obvious one here. It was everywhere in the park, and there's a moment usually in late July, early August, when I say to Rob, you got too much, and actually we always do the same thing. You look at it like that and it looks terrible, but if you go up on a drone you realise it's a clump here and a clump there, and it's not that bad.
And horses don't actually eat it when it's growing live in a field, do they? They eat around it. Otherwise there'd be no more Dartmoor ponies in the world. That'd be evolution.
They've sort of got round it. Well, look, I mean, I really look forward to taking some of this out into the wild block.
Yes,
I mean, not to take it away for the garden and hearing what actually happens from Rob.
Okay, so here we are on what feels like an island after a short boat ride, and some expert driving skills from Hugh, and some landing skills from Rob. Now this is apparently Regen Rob. Rob, lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
That's Hugh's title he's given you. That's not the title.
Not my own. Yep.
And now we're going on a bit of an adventure, aren't we?
Well, we are. Yeah. So we're sort of pretty much in the middle, more or less in the middle of this, what we call Fritton Lake Wilding, which is a 1,000-acre wilding project, which is very broadly made up of Fritton Lake, which is obviously a reservoir, and about 150 acres of that that acreage, and then there's a sort of mixed woodland around that, which is sort of planted over heathland, traditionally Suffolk soundlings, and then around that there's which is really particularly Rob's specialty, the ex-arable.
Yes.
Which is also now changing a lot. So it's up here on the sand with low rainfall. It's a slow transition, and we've got a lot of quite valuable timber here that, much as it might not be typical of a wild project, it just has a value.
Yeah.
And it has a nature value too. So we're not in any rush. We see it as a long-term sort of 50 to 100-year project of change.
Yeah.
But we're 7 years in, and it's actually always nice to show someone around who knows a bit about it, who can see some of the things. A bit worried about your expertise on birds. You might catch us out, but
I'm not that much of an expert. Yeah, no, looking forward to it, and obviously nice to have the garden warbler right outside my accommodation this morning. Another nice warbler to add to the list of beautiful birds, along with the nightingale. You really are,
yeah. Well,
I
think that. I'm not sure if Joel's hearing things or whether these are your little speakers pumping out birdsong, but it's been very nice.
Either way, it's working.
Yeah, it's working.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Let's go take a look, see what we can find.
And that's great because it shows some sort of 7-year rewilding after 20-year rewilding.
Yeah, so we often stop here because, in a sense, you've got this. We're in the intersection here between Old Heathland to the left, and what's happened to that in the 100 years since the First World War is it's been gradually planted over, and so we've lost. There are fragments of heath, and we're sitting on a fragment of old Suffolk soundlings here. You can just see cross-leaved heath, which is a sort of not heather but a classic. Heathland plant that used to
larval food plant for the silver-spotted skipper, which hopefully will turn up in time.
Exactly, and then over here, this field, I think I'm right in saying, Rob, we took out of production in 2016.
Yeah, that's right. It was a bit before my time.
So we were angling to put this into wilding, but we hadn't heard the right noises at last. Having tried initially in 2009, were coming from Natural England, but we didn't know with any surety that we were going to get in. So we took a bit of a wing and a prayer, and there's a very, very light land and quite awkward farming field with pylons and it's very, very sandy. We took it out and put it into a set aside, and luckily by the time that would have naturally had to go back into farming, we were inside the scheme. So this field has been the longest in this side of the lake, out of arable.
Yeah.
And actually you could argue, and I think we often do wonder why it isn't further ahead, because the first 4 years it didn't have any grazing apart from incidental deer grazing. So it had quite a few years to kind of recover and begin to put up some secondary growth in the form of either gorse or birch particularly, and broom, and maybe even scrub oak. And we'll see in a minute, but there is a lot on there, but it's taken an amazingly long time, and I think because it ultimately it doesn't want to be a scrub field, it wants to be a more open heathy kind of field. So you can see we've introduced 1 or 2 pens with mostly gorse, a bit of thorn for overwinter food. We've actually also brought in a few fruit trees which are not typical of a heathland, or at least not in the record here, but of course if you're going to have pigs or ponies, rotten apples in like orchard style is very valuable food source. So we're not too precious about the introduction side. To the right, you can just see one field that has stayed as arable. It's a sort of anomaly within the block. Quite a big, nice flat field where we still can grow spuds. It's one of our valuable fields in that sense. So we've left that, and actually what we do see is in the 1,000 acres, one field of arable which changes from through its cropping rotation. It does actually add diversity. It doesn't look quite how people imagine it's going to look, but
Sure.
often you'll find all the deer out there.
Yes. Speaking of deer, and there were some in the distance I just saw as we turned up.
Yeah, so there's a lot of fallow here. The purists obviously bang on about them not being native, but I'd say that if they came with either the Romans or the Normans, they can they're as native as any of us really. So so we like having them. So right over there you can see our Exmoor ponies. We've at the moment just got geldings. We haven't fallen into the trap of breeding. Lovely though it is, because unfortunately this country's not yet ready for horse meat, and we don't really want to end up with ponies we've got to sell to France. It doesn't feel necessary. So we've just kept to geldings, and they're a riot because what they do is they charge about, seemingly having the best time without any particular reason. You'll see them galloping through the view on the charge, or like they're having a game. Whereas obviously cattle tend to be more sedentary, and they don't seem to have the joy of being in the wild that the Exmoors really do. Yeah. So we love them, and they're good, and also quite easy to see and get close to.
Yes.
But this is an interesting place, and actually, Rob, thinking about it, that in the years that we've been sitting here and talking about it, we have begun to thin. It doesn't look like it particularly, but to strip back the forestry on this side slowly but surely. Leave these old scrub oaks, but to reduce the amount of birch, which then will be kept down by the livestock. It's a long way to go, but as I said earlier, we don't want to just take timber out to prove a point.
No. We
want to take it out because there's a value, and we have quite a big firewood business that goes through Fritton Lake, which harvests a lot of the birch. And of course birch is a native pioneer, so it's here for the right reason, not the wrong reason. Yeah,
and hopefully the kind of slow encroachment of this gorse down either side of this ride is going to provide a great habitat for a lot of breeding birds as well. Things like the whitethroats, yellowhammers, the garden warbler I saw this morning, and things like that. It's just such a great shrub, isn't it?
It's interesting to see how the different fields have developed differently. So this one's sort of 10 years in, but it has been quite slow, or 9 years in. You can see the scrub and the birch is now coming. On the way back, we'll show you another one, which was grass for sort of 10 years, and since then it's had 10 years of proper rewilding.
Wow.
And that is now a much more advanced kind of early birch wood pasture sort of landscape.
Brilliant.
And actually, the next field over, which has been
we could do
this, has got really advanced gorse.
Yes.
So it really just depending on what the seed bank is like, what the soil type is like. We see it really varies sort of from field to field. But we'll provide that mosaic of habitats that we're looking for.
But what's encouraging is if you were to harvest 50% of the birch here on our left, right now, actually the difference between the left and the right is far reduced from when we were looking at it 5 years ago or 6 years ago. So it's quite encouraging even for me. And I mean, actually, talking of the gorse, you're right, there was a lot of it here a long time ago, but our last big timber extraction came along here. It was quite wet, and the machine obviously churned the path up.
Yeah.
And that's a result of this. It could have been pigs, but it's actually, we recognise here anyway that mechanical intervention is a necessary part of the exercise alongside natural through pigs and grazing.
It's
animals.
like me with the, when I go in, people think it's a bit radical going in and using a 20-ton bulldozer to strip an acre of soil off, but unless you've got 100 years and sheep, not most of us have that long to live. So it's sometimes the mechanical aid really does speed up the process, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Those fallows are dead ahead.
Well, we can let's push along here and then do a bit of Dalefield.
Sure.
Okay.
Amazing how the oaks. I mean. Oh yeah. So we've probably got about 30. We do head counts, but I think the honest truth is we've got too many deer. But they're allowed to move between the wild block and the rest of the farm. We're not penned in.
Sure.
And I mean, who wouldn't want to have them? They're not great. They're not great for natural regen, but this this area, you know, if you're looking at oak, it would struggle for natural regen. It's very, very light land.
Yeah.
And they do move quite wildly. They don't sort of tend to sit on one spot. They move a lot. But there are some estates that have a zero deer policy. They'll just shoot to kill everything.
Yeah. In
order to allow more regen. But we're rightly or wrongly, we're a little bit on the fence. We sort of sit in the middle. We think we've got a sort of around 30 or 40 fallows at any one time. They get poached quite a lot because they're easy to see from the road, and people at Christmas time you'll find a head, without the body that someone's inside. And then of course you lose a few on the road, a few move out naturally. So
what's your view on the rhododendron?
well,
Hugh?
so when we put in the scheme originally in 2009, and sadly at the time didn't get in, we did actually. The other big application at that time was to remove Natural England. If you remember, there was that big battle about Snowdon, and where the locals wanted to keep the rhododendron, and Natural England wanted to strip it away because it's non-native.
Yeah.
And actually, I haven't been there recently to see what actually happened. But here, I appreciate there's some right on our left, but when it was brought in by the Victorians as an ornamental plant, there's a central carriageway that goes through this wood that was ornamentally planted with species trees, obviously back in the Victorian times, and rhododendron, and it spread everywhere.
Yeah.
So although you can see a bit of it, we've knocked it out. Probably close to 80% of it from within the woodland, and especially on the edge of the lake, where it was growing almost like a mangrove over the water.
Right.
And of course, if you know anything about, you were talking about ponds earlier, the deep water, not a huge amount goes on, but the shallow water where life is.
Yes. Yeah.
It was being killed, and so the water company and all the nature organisations were very keen that we got rid of it. So we got a big grant to remove it.
Yeah.
And I have to say that has been, easily the biggest success story and the biggest project that I'll probably ever be involved within the context of nature conservation here, because it was 2 miles worth of very thick 160, 70-year-old rhododendron, and it's almost all gone. They're still seedlings, and we're still quite brutal. We go along and pull them out.
Yeah.
Within the actual woodland, we leave the odd clump because it does provide a bit of winter cover. It is pretty, and we know it can't expand. But along the edge of the lake, it's incredibly hard to manage.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and now you've got great, recovery of reeds, alder, and all the aquatic species that come with that. Willow herb. Yeah. So this field was rewilded or let go in the tenure of Regen Rob, and it was spuds, wasn't it, Rob? The last.
No, it was planting of the last rock.
Okay. Yeah. So we walked. Is that there's a woodlark there? Oh no, that's a hawk. Sorry.
Room right behind you. Right about 10 feet from the track.
Oh yeah, we haven't seen any of
yeah.
that. So we've had a lot of gorse coming in, but this is a field where we think I haven't updated for Michelle, but there has been a pair of woodlark on here quite a lot.
Oh cool, okay, yeah.
And we hope this year they were nesting. Last year they, but we did march the pigs across this field after the barley, just to sort of rootle and motivate, which obviously is quite good for that sort of seed activation, and so it got a bit of a head start compared to some of the fields. But sometimes that one comes up here and there's a slight nostalgia to the fact that you remember bouncing across here on a tractor, and it's a good, it's a reasonably good. This was also being a light land field in our spud rotation, and so if you were thinking of wilding, or anyone's thinking of wilding, one of the things there are probably two things that will stop you: solar and potatoes, because they are both more valuable, crudely. At least it's valuable, financially valuable. But now that it's beginning to change a lot, and you can almost begin to sort of see there's a road. This is our road border with the old oaks along it, and you can sort of now begin to see that. That in another 5 or so years, when these birch get a bit bigger, it will feel like one thing rather than two different things.
Yeah,
it's less and less like a field now. It's never going to be. Often people have been to Knepp when they come here, and obviously that's a lot much older, but also it's on clay and everything grows like stink out of clay.
Yes.
And nothing's going to grow fast here ever. You get a hot, dry July and everything's brown in a couple of weeks here. And also it's heathland. I mean, it's not meant to be.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not meant to be that.
It's a different soil
But this
structure.
is probably the field that we feel it almost feels like a cheat because it's just been so rapid. And as Rob was saying, that the cattle have sort of lost the memory of going right round both sides of the lake. So the last, which has been a frustration because obviously it means they're overgrazing some areas.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm very pleased to say they're now. You'll see them later, but round the north side, after a year or so of just forgetting about it, or maybe we changed it. I think we changed the mothers. We thinned out some of the older cows, and maybe the younger ones hadn't remembered. But if normally there's more and more forage, and what's encouraging is there is slowly more and more forage inside the woodland.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas when we started in 2020, this was ex-arable, so it was basically earth and full of chemical residue and weeds, and the wood was unthinned and basically bracken.
Yeah.
So though it's 1,000 acres, it's not 1,000 acres of food. It's in fact a 1,000 acre desert.
Yeah.
Certainly for livestock, and so it's now quite exciting that it's beginning to, with a bit of give and take for the different seasons and the different variations from summer to summer, putting up quite a lot of food.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think we hope, Rob, to have, I mean, in theory, maybe not quite yet, but certainly by 2030 and beyond, maybe about sort of 20 to 30 breeding cows in here. So sort of 60-ish head of cattle at any one time as our main herd. Yeah. And then a few pigs and ponies, and who knows, a few goats at some point in the future.
Yeah.
So bears, of course, and lynx.
That's it, lynx. Lynx first, then the wolves. So all we've got to do now is find the cows.
Yeah, we do. We need to find the cows. We're going to have a quick trip up to across some of the arables, so Rob can talk. So you can hear actually what regen farming is.
Rob can do his piece.
Rather than my sort of, I did feel slightly on the spot. I was thinking of that map, that used to be. I think it was a groundswell map. I'm trying to remember yesterday, but it was a reasonable showing. But I think we'll get some more detail.
Great. No, look forward to it.
Great.
Is right, Rob. They did soil sampling, didn't they, from the 5 or 6 different fields, this being one of them.
Yeah.
And on the basis of what they found, some was in heathland restoration, some was in acid grassland.
This one, the rough fields were earmarked for heathland restoration.
Right.
And actually the sorrel and the gorse and the broom coming shows that's
absolutely, yeah.
So you've got a penned area there.
Yeah. So I mean, again, purists are a bit narky about this kind of thing, but maybe 20 years ago when net started, and don't forget they obviously learnt from the Dutch, and so everyone's learned from someone, but we kind of know what this was from the record. We know this was all heath. I've got maps of it as heath. Yeah. There were none of those trees. It was all open grazed heath probably for thousands of years in one form or another. And so I personally, with the years I've got left, I'm very happy to try and accelerate the process we know. I think it's more controversial arguably none of this what we might loosely call Corsican or Europine, it should be here, but it is here now. Yeah. And the fallow deer, you could argue the toss about them, but I think we have to be a bit more broad-shouldered. Huh?
You work with what you've got, don't you?
Yeah. And there's probably, I don't know, £1 million of standing timber if you were to take it all today. Well, that's a value to the ecosystem, but also to the business. So, what we look to see here is if you were looking across this in another 50 years, this would be quite woody, shrubby, with hopefully eventually some scrub oak alongside the birch and the gorse and the broom, but quite open. But that will be much more open, and we'll be able to see much further through that. Most of that will get harvested, and so what we are doing is when we do a harvest, is we do the routine thinning that fits with forestry, and then at the same time have earmarked an area to open up completely. Yeah. Whereas before it's just been routine thinning, which is just like farming trees. And that's really the big change, but you only do forestry every 6 years, so it's slow. Yeah. I mean, and that's dependent on 6 to 8 years, depending on the market. Yeah. We did a big thinning through here at the start of the scheme, so maybe in the next year or two we'll. So we also want your eye to be able to travel through to where we were and link the heaths. So it's easier for birds to move and easier to sort of see it as one landscape, whereas a series of
You just see through those pines to the other side of the valley, and if the pine were gone, it would be quite one continuation, wouldn't it?
It would certainly be visually great, but at the same time, whenever I go and mark trees, I then get, it's earmarking people for slaughter. It's quite, even with a tree, even with a tree, even more with a tree, you get quite emotional.
Yeah.
I like, just to make fun of our efforts with all the fencing, is just over here is another clump of self-set, naturally occurring gorse, which is good.
Nature just literally saying, "Don't worry, we've got this."
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You guys, we're under control. I mean, it's amazing how much there is here, and it's like it's been put in a line. I mean, I don't quite know how that happened. It looks too good to be true, but it's all just come of its own accord.
Maybe an old boundary or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously. Yeah, there might be an old field boundary there. You're right. Yeah. That would be quite an interesting thing to look at the old maps to see whether, because this would obviously be more than one field.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting, having now been around a few of the other wild blocks, is most of them are on what you might loosely call fairly traditional agricultural land.
Yes.
Not all of them, but some of them. Net being a good example. So, 10 years ago, you could see the big hedges. Now you can't. In our case, apart from the boundary hedge, pretty much right around the whole 1,000 acres, there are almost no internal hedges.
Yes.
So we haven't got that seed stock of thorn and all the other sort of hedgerow species to just apart from on the edges. So
I see one hawthorn down there behind you in flower right now.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's good. But they're going to obviously be brought in by birds and by wind slowly. But what some of the other people doing, doing a big coppice on a hedge, creating a lot of seed source, and then very quickly you get, particularly with blackthorn, it just comes so.
Yes.
Look how thick this is coming.
Yeah, this is really coming along, isn't it? I think this is a point where the livestock can't, just take everything, because they'll come and strip a few, but then. And what's great is that they become a bit more shrubby once they've chewed a bit, rather than just a load of bean poles.
I reckon another 5-7 years, Hugh, you'll have yourself a proper nightingale belt down here, won't you?
Yeah, I hope so.
But they really do love that kind of mid-height shrub, don't they? It's 10 to 15 feet, and then once it gets too leggy and too woody, that's when they tend to move on.
Yeah.
So the management of this in time is going to be crucial to providing that habitat for them.
Yeah, and I think that's probably quite true of our block of land. Oh, I'll just get this.
So really, the main sort of challenge when I came to Somerleyton 7 years ago was that we were moving away from an area where farms got subsidies just for farming into a more sort of public money for public goods situation, and also on the back of sort of general profitability of arable cropping has sort of been under pressure for a lot of years, coupled with Hugh's desire to get the farm working for nature as well. So really, we had sort of quite a big crossroads that we had to decide which way we were going to go.
Yeah.
So what we've done really is we looked at the map of the farm. Thankfully, all of Hugh and all of his sort of ancestors have kept all the hedges intact, all the trees intact. So it's got quite a lot of natural capital already.
Yeah.
But that does mean the fields were quite small and awkward shaped, sort of not very efficient for modern farming machinery.
Yeah.
So what we've done actually is most fields, if they're a funny shape, we'll be sort of farming a rectangle in the middle, which is really efficient.
Yeah.
And then all the land around the outside, the sort of funny shaped bits, will be used for provision of habitat, conservation of some kind or another. And at the same time, the hedges that are in existence, we've allowed to change the cutting regime so they can basically be allowed to get incrementally bigger and bigger.
Brilliant.
So instead of being a sort of small box, which gets cut back to the same point every time, we just let them enlarge into kind of a really 20-foot wide kind of corridor with some kind of buffer on either side as well.
Yeah.
However kind of carefully or regeneratively you're farming, if you're growing a crop up to a particular point, you are effectively making it so there's not much other habitat there.
Yes,
so you've got to have that network of connectivity throughout the whole farm. Really big areas which are now kind of managed for wildlife, and then we crop the bits in between as sensitively as we can. So that's sort of changing the cropping.
And that perimeter around those fields is actually quite a long linear feature, isn't it? By the time you add up the meters after the meters.
It joins everything up. That's the key thing. So every field is kind of well connected to all the others. So when you look at the map of all our kind of wildlife options that we've got around the farm, it's a big part of it. It's probably 25% of the farmed area.
Wow.
and also it hasn't really affected our ability to produce, because we're
No.
farming the most efficient bit in the middle.
Yeah.
And we've changed the cropping rotation as well. So instead of quite intensive roots and sugar beet and some sort of not very soil friendly cropping, we've stretched out the rotations. We've got just behind us here, you can see that's sort of a herbal ley. Sorry, the hedge has just got in the way.
All right. Bloody hedges.
But but growing sort of a long-term herbal ley, which would be producing food for the animals, for our
Yes.
livestock, and giving the arable land just a really good
And
rest.
how do you manage that? Just one cut a year then for a hay, or do you get a couple of cuts out of it?
Could be 2 cuts.
Yeah.
Around here we are quite sort of moisture limited. We're mostly quite
Sure.
light land and quite low rainfall. So in a dry year like last year, we got 1 cut, and that was it.
Yeah.
It just basically, if it turns
Which, of
hot
course,
and
is
dry,
better again for the breeding birds.
absolutely.
For
It's,
any lapwings that might be in the area,
I mean, it's
meadowpipits,
all
skylarks.
summer there's some short grass with a lot of seed on the ground. I mean,
Brilliant.
wildlife love it. So at any point, any time around the year, there's going to be all manner cropping, all kinds of cover cropping, legume fallow options, sort of interwoven throughout the farm landscape, and an awful lot of winter bird food as well, which we plant for them.
Yes.
So we'll grow it like a crop, and then in the winter just leave it standing there, and there'll be tons and tons of small seeds, which is we've seen huge increases in sort of the farmland bird population as well.
So your linnets, your goldfinches.
That's right.
those
I
sorts
mean,
of birds.
huge flocks. In the winter time, it's better because they're all concentrating
Yes.
on the areas we planted. You drive down, they just kind of move out like clouds in front of you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Wow.
quite something to see. But so we'll stop. Maybe when we get to the end of this field here, we can have a look. Flower margin here, which you can see. We're a bit early in the year to see any blossom, but it's all coming. We're farming the rectangular bit in the middle there, which is actually going to get planted with one of our rotational legume fallow mixes. So it'll be mostly legumes and some flowering species planted to grow over the summer.
Yes.
Which is putting a lot of nutrients back into the soil, really good soil structure, and then that'll be returned to cropping. If we stop here, Hugh, that's quite a good spot. So this really marks. This is the rectangular sort of efficient section on the right, which is good for farm machinery. And that leaves a funny shaped triangle with a bent edge on one side. So we just drew a straight line down here. The left-hand side is kind of naturally regenerating. We call them wild edges, really.
Yes.
And you can see the hedge itself is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
This is a really good hedge because it's mostly sort of hawthorn and blackthorn, which can get bigger and wider without taking any ill effects.
Yep.
We have got some elm hedges, which are more difficult because if you let elm get bigger and bigger, it just gets Dutch elm disease and dies. So those ones have to be managed more. So this is a good example. Yeah, wider hedge, a really good kind of natural regeneration buffer, and then the farming alongside there. So when it does come time to harvest this field or prepare it for the next crop, all the wildlife has got a really safe sanctuary to go to.
Yes.
So we don't lose anything. So
That's great.
Perhaps if we pull forwards to the other side, Hugh. So you can see the hedges suckering out here and just getting wider and wider.
There's quite a lot now, isn't there?
Yeah, it really is.
Scale, but blackthorn is the sort of number one for that kind of thing.
Yeah, suckering out and getting wider.
To move. Everything else takes a bit longer.
So you can see this is the counterpoint to this sort of bent hedge, is that we've got another straight line here. So this field has been cropped on the left, and again it's got this foreground is actually a planted wildflower margin.
Brilliant.
And then into the distance is a natural regeneration buffer with the hedge getting wider. So again, right in the middle of the farm landscape, a really stable, valuable habitat corridor.
Yeah, and it's not really losing you that much crop, is it?
That's the thing. It really hasn't changed the cropped area that much.
No.
What we do is more efficient because reversing combines into tight corners is not
Oh, yeah.
productive. You just cause compaction and lose
That's right.
time. So we've got
bits
Hugh's
of
got a
red campion coming into flower over there, look.
yeah, that's right. Hugh's got a very natty log line of save time, save money, save nature.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good thing.
Carbon, save nature. Yeah. So the crop behind it here is Maris Otter winter barley. So that's a crop that we like growing because it's used locally to produce craft beer.
Okay, yeah.
It's been grown in this area it's one of the oldest varieties of barley going actually, and it's
Gotcha.
and that's why it's so popular with craft breweries because it has been used for a long time. It's one of the highest quality.
That there
Oh yeah, it's a butterfly on the
is
campion.
a wall brown hue. You
Well
got a
done.
Wall brown butterfly. Very
Excellent.
nice. There's another one here actually.
So you can see a few little oaks just coming in this margin.
Yep.
So oh look, yeah, it's doing well. So this we're a bit early. If you come in June, this is an absolute riot of colour, as you can imagine.
Yes, I can imagine.
But it is coming.
So you
And
got red campion, lots of oxeye, lots of knapweed,
Yep.
classic wildflowers here that are going to be doing really well. And just to have 3-wall brown within a matter of metres.
On a cold day.
On a
It's,
cold
pretty good
day in May, which is the first brood of the season. I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing. That is a testament to your efforts, Rob. For
I
sure.
hope so. I hope so. And so what we're really trying to do, because I mean, Hugh's aware that some people would have just sort of said, let's rewild
And
the whole
sorry,
estate.
another one. What have we got down there? Painted lady.
Oh, well done.
There it goes.
Excellent.
Zooming off. Sorry.
Because we were quite keen to rather
Another
than just,
wall brown.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Oh wow.
You
this is
might
coming really
have
well.
a few distractions for looking at this.
But some
Why,
people might have said, well, why don't you just rewild the whole estate?
Yeah.
But really, we felt that is sort of abdicating the challenge of producing food, because it's got to happen somewhere.
Well, I
Um,
think it's a very fine line, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you've got to make it profitable for you guys from a business sense.
Yep.
I'm sure as much as you and Hugh would love to do this for free,
Yeah.
you've all got to make a living.
Got to make a living.
And equally, another painted lady, equally, we all need to eat. So it is a balance, and it's just incredible to see. And why this can't be replicated across every farm in the UK is...
Well, that's
I
what we
don't
thought.
know.
If you just do the conservation, everyone can say, well, that's fine for you, but what about what are people going to eat? So we really wanted to produce a model whereby it is profitable, it is producing food, in a serious, commercial capacity, but it is also delivering for nature.
Yes.
And so we felt if we can do that, we've actually got something we can be proud of and
100%.
and show
yeah.
off.
I think you're doing a very good job from what I've seen so far, which is only a small part of it.
Excellent. And this is a field which is sort of still an arable field, but it's having a 3 or 4 year break from actual cropping.
Okay.
So this has been in a sort of range of environmental stewardship options for a while. So we've got basically a kind of planted wildflower mix in the foreground. Then what you see in the back there is the stubble of what was an overwinter bird food crop.
Okay, yeah.
So we planted a mixture of millets and sort of small seeded crops, which we'll plant them again in about June, and then they grow, leave them all summer, and then in the autumn they sort of set seed, leave it standing there, and it just produces tons and tons
And of course,
seed.
the millet really good for tree sparrows. Do you have tree sparrows on the estate?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
So you can see we sort of just split it up.
Wow, yeah.
So eventually,
And so this will be kind of mown and collected as a bit. Oh, some lucerne. Is that lucerne?
yeah, that's right. Yep,
Yeah.
sandfoin probably.
Yeah, yes,
So
yeah.
producing lots of blossom. Basically, it's supposed to produce pollen and nectar during the summer months.
And then you'll just get a hay crop off it later on in the year to
Well,
feed the cattle, or will you just leave
we
it?
may cut it, or it may just be, if we just leave it to dry out and set seed, we might just mow it in situ and let it come
Yep.
back another year.
Oh, and there was I couldn't quite see. I think it was a hornet, by the way, but
Oh yeah.
hornet, another painted lady.
So the idea is that we haven't given up on this field for cropping forever, but
Yeah.
this got absolutely hammered by sort of under the old regime, a very late harvested crop of potatoes in
Yes.
really wet conditions, really terrible for the soil.
Yeah.
And that was just at the point when Hugh and I were sort of changing the way we're running the farm.
Yes.
So we're not going to do that anymore. We've changed what we're growing on the rest of the farm, and to give this field a bit of a reset, it's now
Yeah.
had, I think we're into year 4 of this stewardship option. So eventually this can come back into cropping when it's had that
Bit of
rest.
maythorn there.
When it's had that rest and sort of repair period,
Yes.
we can then move those options to somewhere else on the farm, crop that one again. So yeah, it really is trying to intermingle the habitat provision within the farmed environment
Yeah,
without
brilliant.
giving up on the farming.
So where are we now then, Rob?
So we're now on the historic parkland which is surrounding Somerleyton Hall. So this was originally conceived as sort of a semi-natural backdrop to a big grand stately home. And over the years, some of it had been converted to arable, and the rest really had, instead of being semi-natural, it had become quite crimped and preened and carefully managed, like a lot of parks around stately homes are. They kind of look a bit like a bowling green. So
Yes.
just mown very short, kept
Devoid
looking very
of life.
tight. Exactly, remove all the dead wood, make it look very tidy, which I think was sort of a Victorian thing. Is for the
Yes.
first time we had, the machinery and the capacity to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you weren't doing it, you were a bad land manager.
That's right, yeah.
And that sort of that.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly, that's right. So it takes quite a brave person to say, right, we're not going to do that, even though it really is what the world expects. So we, 6-7 years ago now, we put this one into a kind of a semi-rewilded management. So instead of mowing it, here's our stalks.
Oh, goodness me. Now that's a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. So this is a bit exciting, Hugh.
Yes, well, I'm glad
White
we can-
stalks. Well, they're moving around the cage, of course, the enclosure, but tell me more.
Well, we were talking about Derek Gow, the rebel rewilder,
Yes.
before, who become a friend, and he very kindly offered me 2 pairs, I think sort of 4 years ago.
Wow.
And so they're very young birds, and so it took a whole sort of year and season before they sort of started to lay eggs. But actually, we've had quite a lot of success at the right-hand pair. We just she's got 3 chicks for this year.
Oh, fantastic.
And the left-hand pair, she's sadly got off the nest, which worries me a bit, but has got 4 eggs, and she's had eggs before, but hasn't actually brought off any young. So we're hoping maybe this might be a breakthrough year for her. But obviously, like all these things, the idea out here we have to have a claim, and the claim is that they'll be the most easterly storks.
Yes.
We're actually on the east coast, but here we go. She's coming back to her nest.
She's coming back.
Good.
Wow.
And they're rather extraordinary birds, actually, but they obviously have a lovely sort of clacking noise that you can hear from the house. And I think we're close to the point, if they do successfully bring off young this year, that we can then start to let some of them out.
Yeah.
Maybe keep some of them in to keep the other birds close. And there's some lovely big cedars over there that they might nest in, but gradually to just become a resident population that then could hopefully expand here and maybe into neighbouring landscapes. But I have to say that, like all these things, like we talked yesterday a bit about the Great Busted project down on Salisbury Plain with David Waters, but also I've been to see the Dutch and their Dalmatian pelican project. And for anyone who hasn't been close to these sort of birds, we're all used to garden birds, and even though they're very depleted and need our help, these sort of big sort of birds that seem
these
to come
are
from a
landscape
line
birds,
that time
aren't they?
forgot. They really are, and they're standing up, this high at your hip, and they've got a kind of rare elegance and presence in the landscape that we've just forgotten, and it's very sad, really. But so anyway, they're giving us a lot of pleasure. There's quite a lot of work involved, but not least putting up a pen like this, so you've got to have room. Yeah. And if we did it all again, I think I'd have tried to get maybe 4 pairs at the beginning, just to increase that breeding window, because obviously the plan is to let them out. But don't forget, these were cage reared, so they're not completely used to being outside. So you have to do it very carefully. Anyway, it's a great project, and some people Paul, say we should be concentrating on other things, but I think in the mix you need some iconic things that draw public interest. And we've seen how much they did at NEP, and so we really hope they can do that here too.
Well, the same with NEP. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a passion of yours, but of course it's an industry as well. And the more you can create in terms of tourism, the more visitors you can attract, the more money it puts in the pot for other projects, right? So, it helps. So the more people visit, the more people put that interest into what you're doing. And I can't quite believe I'm looking at a stork there. They're just... Are they not one of the most magnificent birds, They
really are.
To think that they are now colonising our landscape. Well, brief stork interlude over. Yeah. What a nice surprise that was to see. So where are we heading now, Rob?
So we're now travelling through the parkland around Somerleyton Hall, which you can just see behind you. You peek through the trees.
Yeah. We've got some Egyptian geese there with some young.
And here come the landscape managers.
Yes.
So this is a herd of Welsh black cattle.
Welsh blacks, yeah.
Welsh blacks. They suit this quite well actually, because they're sort of obviously from the hills of Wales, where they're not fed huge amounts. They have to sort of make a living on, nothing too special. So actually, some extensive grazing, it works really well.
Yeah.
So these are out here 365 days a year, which is completely different. Normally, as we said before, parklands would traditionally be cut within an inch of their life, kept really pristine. Maybe take a cup of hay or silage off them. And maybe graze them for a bit and then have nothing on over winter. So we've stopped all cutting, all mowing, obviously no fertilisers or sprays or anything. And then these guys are out here 365 days a year. And the idea is it's much more like a sort of savanna landscape, where in the summer the grass will grow really fast, far more grass than they could ever eat. You get long wavy grass in seed, lots of food, lots of habitat. And then over winter, they will slowly sort of munch through it as the grass dies off. So you end up with this kind of landscape you can see here, which is sort of some quite well developed tussocks of grass which never get grazed, some thicker patches of bramble coming through, and lots of scrub and thorn coming, and then some areas of short grass where the cattle really favour it. So trying to get that kind of natural wood pasture landscape. You can see there's a few young saplings and bits of scrub coming around us here. There's a bit of gorse coming over there. And we do try and accelerate it with a bit of planting and protect some areas as well.
Brilliant.
So that's really it. It was quite easy to start here because the parkland had a wall built all the way around it. So 300 acres with a wall all the way around the outside.
Yeah.
So all we really had to do was to change the management.
Yeah.
Whereas up at Fritton where we were, there was 10 kilometres of fence to build through very difficult, terrain before we could even start. So this is quite an easy start. I mean, this won't go completely wild because it is still the backdrop to the house and it sort of has to reflect that. So wood pasture rather than actual kind of turning it back into forest. But
yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's been so nice to see that. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, some thorn making a toehold, particularly out on this east part. It seems to be happier or getting ahead more here. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't look like much after 5 or 6 years, but actually that single transformation. The other one that, of course, we were talking about iconic species, is that when this was being cut, it was basically, forced ryegrass. There was prior to Rob, obviously it was fed for fertiliser. Actually, Rob made a very observant and common sense observation, really, that obviously as old pasture, even with a bit of nitrogen, it's not producing particularly good grass.
Yeah.
And now we produce grass in the arable rotation where it's, farmed, so you get a really good crop which gets us through the winter, and this is left to naturalise. And I'm not a botanist, but it's wonderful coming and you can see the flowers, but also the native grasses as well that are less obvious have come roaring back, really. And so it's this really rugged landscape that perhaps it was meant to be when it was set out, actually, as well. And
yeah, sort of more semi-wild. And I mean, it is a slow process when land sort of changes, but even in the first couple of years, we got the tussocks well before we got any scrub coming.
Really?
Even those tussocks, that provides a habitat for voles and small mammals. And then immediately barn owls came back and started hunting over the park.
Oh wow,
got the
fantastic!
Food. So you build the food chain from the bottom up. But it takes a while, but we're getting some good results. Oh, there'll be absolutely loads.
So you're saying there's a part of the estate which we won't quite get time to go to today, Rob. So what kind of a landscape is that?
That's right. It's quite distinct.
I've now jumped into the front of this aquatic German beast, by the way. So if we get stuck, I'm just going to have to translate some of these to see if we can get out. Yeah, amazing. So sorry. Yeah. So what have you got on the other side of the lake?
Yep. So down to the south of this block is the sort of southern border of the estate, which is the River Waveney. And as part of the floodplain of the River Waveney, there's a big area of grazing marshes, which are really in contrast to the arable land is quite sandy and drought prone, whereas the marshes are flat clay with sort of water close underneath.
Yeah.
So really, in the hot summers, any grass on the arable upland is a bit prone to burning off and going brown. Whereas on the marshes, they just grow and grow. They love however hot it gets, however dry it gets, they've got the warmth underneath them and the facility to grow. So really our kind of, the main cattle herd on the estate is only really here because of the marshes. So what we're trying to do is the cattle graze the marshes all summer where there's loads of grass. Then in the winter time, when it's too wet, they come off the marshes and come onto some cover crops that we've grown for them on the arable land between the cash crops. So it's a really good system. And these marshes are also really valuable habitat for wading birds.
Of course,
so we've got redshank and lapwing. Birds that don't have a lot of habitat because there is very little wetland in the UK.
Yes, of course.
So when we've sort of improved the management in terms from a bird's point of view by digging a lot of foot drains, making a lot of scrapes, a couple of islands. Because we can bring water on in the winter really easily. I mean, they flood in the blink of an eye. So we can sort of control that water and get it to a level where there's a bit of grass and a bit of standing water, attract all the birds over winter as a sort of grazing habitat, and then get some breeding going on in the spring. So it's really.
And do you have curlews on that part of the estate?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we sort of have a good suite of wading birds, and actually we're quite lucky because we're not on our own. We've got Raveningham Estate, which nearly borders us to the west, and to the north we've got Suffolk Wildlife Trust Nature Reserve called Carlton Marshes. They're managing their marshes in a very similar way. So actually, there's a bit of a selection of places. So if one site gets a bit of disturbance one year or something, the birds don't just have nowhere to go. They've got one of the neighbouring places they can go to.
Brilliant. So we're now heading back to the direction we came from to see the famous Highland cattle. Hopefully they'll make an appearance. And just heading along some of these edges of the field. It's really fascinating seeing these margins, seeing how just a few metres along these arable fields around the margins can really provide a lot of habitat. I've seen so many butterflies already, wall browns, small whites, greenbone whites, painted ladies, all within a few metres. But of course you times that few metre width by 100 metres and all of a sudden you've got a large expanse of wildflower meadow and verge. So absolutely brilliant to see. So, and I'm loving this truck aquatic beast that Rob and Hugh have acquired. How old is this vehicle, Rob?
I think it's about 1974.
1974. Okay, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's a good 50 years old. So yeah, fantastic. Still going strong.
Got no microchips to go wrong.
No microchips. Yeah, no fancy electrics in this thing. That's for sure.
A good stat is there's 70 kilometres of hedgerow on the estate. So
70 kilometres.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so there you go. There's some stats for you. 70 kilometres of hedgerow. Obviously, great breeding ground for a lot of birds. Great corridors, or a great amount of corridors for so much of the wildlife that's here on this estate. So yeah, wonderful to see. And some hawthorn in flower behind me are just coming out now. So really good to see those. And obviously they're going to go on to provide a lot of berries for the autumn birds, in particular our thrush species such as our fieldfares, redwings, blackboots. Yeah, sorry, so we've made an emergency stop.
yeah, it's just a good example of one of the arable fields, which is in a
Great,
temporary.
let me zoom in on that. So that's a temporary kind of
Temporary-
wildflower meadow.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, so it's going to be wildflowers for
Fabulous.
3 or 4 years, and then that option can move somewhere else in the estate, and this can return to cropping.
Fantastic, wow.
This is actually a small point, but these sort of awkward corners, little bits of farmyard that, again, historically they would have just been mown short. You can't crop or grow anything on them because they're too small and awkward. So you could just keep them tidy with a flail mower, but we made the choice to sort of allow them to become little mini rewilding areas of their own.
Yeah, I love it. Bit of woodlier, bramble.
Yeah,
It's great habitat, great scrub regeneration for so much wildlife.
really safe places for birds, and
Yeah, got a red admiral around there. Brilliant.
just takes a landowner who can, tolerate people saying that looks untidy.
Yes,
Just
that's
say,
it,
well,
yeah.
that's the idea.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're back to the field where the ponies are.
So you can see they can get quite fat on no food at all.
Yeah,
Like Hugh said, if we were farming ponies, we'd be millionaires.
they're millionaires, Rodney. It's really quite fascinating to see the amount of scrub regeneration, isn't it? And of course,
It's quite a good
almost
spot here.
all
actually.
of this isn't planted, is it? It's
No,
just
none of this is planted
natural
at all.
regeneration.
So again, it takes a while. For 5 years, coming out of arable, what you really get is sort of arable weeds,
Yeah,
followed by kind of a few native grasses and start to come in, but it takes a long time for these kind of larger structural plants to sort of
Yeah.
take root. And you do also have to manage the number of livestock on here quite carefully,
of course.
because if you have too many cattle, then you get a hard winter, and they would nibble all that down to nothing.
Yeah,
So you've got to watch it. You can see the bramble is coming, and the bramble really is sort of stage one, because once you've got bramble, that'll dissuade graziers. And
Yeah.
that'll be somewhere where if there happens to be a birch seed or an acorn under there,
yeah. It sort
it
of
can actually
harvests
get
them, doesn't
established.
it? Yeah, it gives them a chance
They-
to grow.
They say the thorn is the mother of the oak, which is quite right.
Yeah, it's very true. Some nice birch colonising there.
So sort of 5 or 6 years to get to this stage, but another 5 or 6 years and they'll be 15 feet high.
Yeah, once they get a toe hold, they do.
Yeah,
they
they're
do
away.
go quick, don't they? A nice block of bramble there.
You often see, if you look at
There's the fallows.
oh yeah, there we go, they're the ones we saw earlier.
There's a couple of muntjac running off down the
Oh
path.
yeah. These tracks are unfortunately from forestry machinery that is really heavy. It has to do its work in winter,
Yeah,
so it does tend to leave some quite deep ruts.
big ruts. Yeah.
So one of the interventions we do make is we're trying to break dominance of bracken here, because the trouble is if you get a lot of pine, then what tends to happen is you get a bracken understory that is so dense that really it just shades everything else out.
Yes.
And it grows so well. So it's not very good for the diversity. So although we are rewilding, we are sort of intervening where we think there's a good case to do so.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to control the bracken. It's quite hard work, as you can imagine, because it just grows back so quickly. But one of the things we've done is fenced in a couple of acres with electric fencing, and put some of the pigs in there. Pigs are really good at sort of churning up the ground, and they can actually
rotivators you can get, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And they can actually eat bracken roots as well. I didn't know this, but if you dig that all up, there's kind of a long, thin, sort of tubular root, which if you break it open, it's quite like a water chestnut sort of consistency. And they'll pull those up and give them a good chew. And of course, over a couple of years, that really does, diminish the bracken's ability to come back. And then you move the pigs on, and you've got all that bare ground, very fertile. And hopefully some other stuff comes back. So we really want to sort of, slightly grazable understory, whereas bracken is actually toxic and nothing eats it.
Yeah, so the hard rush is a bit of an indicator that this is potentially a bit damper than the other areas around the woodland.
We've had a really dry spring, so there's not much water to be seen, but this is very springy land. Kind of the ground all slopes down towards the lake, and there are springs all over it, which is why it grows timber. So it grows timber like crazy. There's a load of, I think these are
sweet chestnut.
There's a lot of sweet chestnut which will be planted and coppiced. Is this a honeysuckle? No, it's a rhododendron, yellow
rhododendron.
So here's the lake on the left here. So the rhododendron were all planted as sort of Victorian ornamentals. Which obviously, they are gorgeous, but the trouble is they are quite an invasive species, and they will take over. And so it was before my time, but none of this birch was here. It was just solid rhododendron all the way down to the water's edge. And it's actually not very good for the water. It shades it out. No reeds can grow, so the water quality diminishes. And again, it's non-native, so not many things actually eat or live in it.
No.
And so there's been a big effort to sort of reduce the rhododendron to a manageable level. It does have wildlife value, because in the wintertime it's evergreen. It provides really good
cover,
habitat.
And bees actually love it, don't they?
Yeah, it's full of blossom. So but if we never did anything, again, it would just be rhododendron here, and everything else would die. So So we talk about rewilding, but actually it's all still managed. We still have to make decisions as to what we're going to do with it.
Well, then it comes full circle, because it was man's intervention that put the rhododendron here in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a nice Douglas fir.
So because this was sort of pleasure grounds, there's a lot of Victorian planting. There's some giant redwoods here as well, which do really well.
Talking of redwoods, I saw the Wellingtonia in the gardens yesterday.
Oh yeah,
What an incredible tree that is!
Absolutely, Seb.
So this is where the pigs have been, foraging wildly.
That's right. Yeah, they're quite good at rootling up the ground and digging it up, and again, it creates some bare soil, which is another habitat, another sort of opportunity for some pioneer species to get in. So just constantly breaking it up, making that mosaic, but the mosaic that shifts all the time.
Yes. So in case we don't see the pigs, Rob, what breed of pigs are they?
So they're large blacks. They're sort of ones that we've taught to live wild, really. We put them in here. We had to start off, to begin with, they don't know how to forage. It's a bit like us. If we suddenly got dropped in the woods, we wouldn't know what to do. So we fed them for quite a while, and then slowly reduced that, and they started to learn that they could forage for the chestnuts, they could dig up these bracken roots, they could eat all manner of grubs, and so they learn their way around, and now they don't get fed at all, and they're quite fat if we do have to come across them. Here's one of the
that's one of the redwoods?
Ornamentals,
Yeah.
Is that a pig? No, sorry, just a black tree stump.
Yeah. So we're now trying to find a crossing over the lake, which Rob is used to finding on foot. So we're now reversing back through these rhododendron to try and find it. Hopefully we'll find it. Fingers crossed.
There we go, that'll be fine.
We found it.
Yes. So we're at the narrow end of the lake now.
Yep.
So this is a causeway because it's very marshy ground. But there is a causeway which is built up by bringing down some rubble over several years.
Yeah.
And I walked it the other day and it was pretty good. I might just quickly do our German translation and find four-wheel drive and diff lock before we get any further. The green lever on the right next to the yellow lever is green lever is four-wheel drive. Great.
There we go.
Look. Let's have to hold it on. Anyway, we'll see. We probably won't need it. It's got good tyres. So we're now on this raised causeway, which is very narrow.
Yeah.
And a bit soft. So the cattle have found this. It took them. This is where people were saying it takes a couple of years, but eventually they got either nosy or hungry enough to find their way down here.
Yeah.
Right, and we're now on the bridge. So there you go. So that is the very end of the lake.
Yes.
It all overflows through this sluice, and it actually then goes into Lowndes Lakes, which is owned by the Water Authority to provide drinking water to Lowestoft.
Oh right, wow.
So, right, well that was. Let's get off this lump. Well, that was the tricky section. Now we're climbing the hill into the woodland on the other side.
Very well driven.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad the engine's warmed up now.
Yeah. Didn't like the cold start this morning,
No.
did it? Okay, so this looks like a different landscape.
Yep, so we're now coming out of the woods and coming into some ex-arable land, which is now sort of more like 15, 20 years since it was cropped.
Wow.
So you can see straight in front of us is all, pigs have been digging this up
Yeah, it's
quite
fantastic.
seriously on here, but you can see the forest, the woodland is getting so much more advanced. It's just sort of coming out of the woods and creeping into what was cropped land.
Yeah.
So again, just really good sort of succession. You've got the older trees are nearest the forest, and then it peters out into these emerging saplings.
Yeah.
So over time, this will just kind of gently march across the landscape until it's all this mosaic we keep talking about.
Ah, and there's some pigs over to the left.
There we go, excellent.
Fantastic.
There's some pigs, and I wouldn't be
We
surprised.
spent so long talking about them that it'll be a shame not to see them.
Yeah. And I bet there'll be some cattle over shading under those trees or something. So although this land hasn't been cropped for quite a long time, it was a sort of managed grassland until 7 or 8 years ago. So it would have been mown every year.
Yes.
So you can see all this roughness, and the reason it's so bumpy is because the pigs have dug this up. This is what they do all day long, is
Wow.
stick their nose under this. In fact, she's lying in a furrow that she's ploughed, look.
Wow. So there's a self-made bed.
That's right.
Look at that. Best rotivators on the planet. And with that amazing nose, I can imagine she's probably smelt us rather than seen us.
That's right, and they can't really see very much with their ears sticking over like that. Oh, interestingly, the cattle are a bit in the woods actually. So I've got some tracking collars on some of the cattle.
Okay, yeah.
I think you're going to see
Some live.
dig it up right now. Obviously found a good bit.
Yeah. And of course, the cows are going to be grazing, but these pigs are, as we've seen, they're going to be just rummaging around, creating all this kind of, you know, rotivated ground, which, as you say, Rob, is just perfect for all the kind of regenerative.
Just keeps it all refreshed. If you had no livestock on here at all, you would just get trees, you know, wall to wall, with nothing underneath, and actually biodiversity would go down.
Yeah.
Really, where you find the most biodiversity is this kind of edge habitat. So you got some short grass, some scrub, some trees, some emergent saplings, and so really the idea is to get the combination of animals right in here. So you got enough grazing to keep some grass short. You got stop the saplings from taking over the whole thing, and then the pigs are there to create a different type of landscape where they literally set it back to day one with some bare soil, and then you get wind-blown seeds coming in and starting all over again. Wow. So if you get it right, the idea is it should be a sort of self-sustaining landscape where there's a mosaic which provides a home for everything.
Yeah, and that's bed number 2 down there.
That's right.
Fantastic. So you think we might bump into some cattle next?
Yeah, I think so. We have got some tracking collars on them, and I had a quick look, and they're not far away now.
Excellent.
The pigs do make it very uncomfortable to drive across, I'm afraid.
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
Got the muntjac over there.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Ah, brilliant.
I'll take left and then go around so you can see them out your window easier.
Thank you very much.
Be interested to see what they're eating, actually.
Fantastic. A proper healing coup. Just loving life. So how many highlands have you got at the moment, Rob?
So there's 12 cows in here.
I think there's 2 more in the woodland down there.
That's right, I can see there's several of them down at the lake. We can go and have a look, and they're probably just having a drink. So 12 cows plus their calves at various different stages. Here we go, these are going to look quite cool.
Hiding in the woods. Oh, here we go. Cow blockade. Look at them all lined up here.
So because they're pretty much left to live as they please, obviously we sort of control a bit when the bull goes in and when he comes out to make sure that the bull isn't in with his own daughters and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But apart from that, there's not much handling, so they are quite wild. You know, most cattle you can sort of go and walk up to them and move them out of the way and load them onto a trailer, whereas this lot are not really interested in that.
They wouldn't appreciate you doing that.
No, that's right. Sort of get a bit more deer-like behaviour.
Yes.
But as Hugh says, it's slightly about rewilding the humans as well.
Yes, very true.
Seeing things you wouldn't expect, sort of pulling branches down from trees, and
Yeah.
they're obviously finding something that they need. So that's looks like foxgloves she's in a patch of there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine she's eating those, but good example of you just what wants to grow will grow.
Yep.
Right. So, that's our gate down there.
Through this bit here, maybe. This is what you call off-roading.
Yeah. I was taught a long time ago you put your thumbs to the outside of the wheel and then they don't get broken when it gets spun on a tree stump.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well done. Well, Rob, I can't say I've ever been in a 50-year-old German beast of a vehicle like that before. That was absolutely amazing, and hats off to you. Your driving skills are second to none, getting through some of those swampy areas. And it's not even wet at the minute, is it? So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well done, and thank you for the explanations. So I now fully understand why you're known as Regen Rob. You've lived up to every expectation that Hugh put forward to me. So thank you. It's really been an eye-opener for me, just seeing how we can manage these areas, or how you can farm these areas and still make a profit.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to show you around, and yeah, great, well, lovely day to do it, and nice to have someone who knows about it and is interested. So thank you very much.
Well, I'm learning all the time, like the rest of us. But yeah, I mean, if you had any bits of advice for anybody in the farming industry that may be watching this, that wants to maybe sort of push towards more of a kind of a natural margin or anything like that, what would be your kind of advice as to how to make it sustainable more than anything?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that we've been sort of polarised into these two camps really, where it's like you've either got farming or you've got conservation, and you can't have both at the same time. And I just really think that we all need to reject that, because we've got to have farming clearly, but we've also got to have conservation. So we've got to find ways to do both, in the same landscape all over the place. So we want to have farming and nature across every part of the country really. So don't see it as an either or. There are ways to put it into every managed environment.
Yeah, and clearly you're making a profit from it, because you're still in a job, the machines are still running, so it's working, and I'm so pleased that I've been able to see that, and hats off to your knowledge for showing me firsthand, and the wildlife. We've just ended the first week of May. We've already got multiple butterfly species up and down these marginal corridors.
Yep.
Imagine if that was all over the UK. It'd just be amazing.
That's the thing. It'd be continuous, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So
bird life, bat life, insect life.
Yeah. Well, the more people know about it and can support it, that's what will make it happen.
Well, you've done a great job in showing how that can work. So
great.
Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
Great
to meet you.
Great to see you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
See you again soon.
Take care.
Cheers.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. So what are your final words of wisdom then, Hugh? If people are looking to rewild, I've done an entire video on rewild versus wilding, because I think in a garden setting, there is a difference. You can't bring in great big herbivores into a garden and let brambles and nettles and everything take over your garden. So I'm conscious there is that difference. But from what you've seen from your travels around the country, and obviously you're interviewing and you're seeing lots of different people, you're seeing lots of different habitats, from a garden to hundreds of acres. What would be your kind of words of wisdom as to anybody who's looking, maybe they're starting, they've just heard the phrase rewilding for the first time, or wilding for the first time, or they've just bought their first house with a garden. What would be your advice to them for in terms of not necessarily how to wild it or what to do with that space, but for in terms of how they can start to think about that journey?
Well, so I think the first thing that I would say, and I think this is quite true of farmers, but I think also a lot of us generally, and certainly was probably true of me, is that when this wide conversation about nature recovery and or wilding, it's still quite new. It's been slightly polarised, and quite a lot of people probably think, a bit. So when health and safety came in, I remember my dad and his generation thought it was a bit sissy. It's like, why? And also they were a bit affronted that anyone, in this case Europe or the European directive, were thinking that they weren't looking after their people in the kind of context of being safe. And I think, and now it's completely normal. It's on the agenda of every meeting you ever had, and we're just taking it on board. I think that wilding, nature recovery, is a bit stuck where health and safety was in the sort of 90s, as in there is a judgment, a bit sissy. Why wouldn't I cut my lawn? Why wouldn't it be neat? Oh, bloody, birds and bees. I think there is a bit of a problem with perception, and I think people worry about what their neighbours think. Sometimes, depending where they live, there's a sort of keeping up with the Joneses sort of problem, and so I think it does take a bit of courage. And I've met enough people who do door knocking where they get a slammed door, or no, I want to keep my BMW there. I don't want to do, I want a tarmac. So you need a bit of perseverance.
Yeah.
Read a bit around online, because if you are worried about how small the impact of a window box might be, actually you can there's some great data out now about the biodiversity gain of just a window box compared to, say, a field of wheat is, so don't be shy about the scale of what you're working at. And kind of just let go a bit, and don't worry too much about the outcomes initially. If you're going to some people love wildflowers and they want to do a wildflower garden. Some people like the idea of just wilding, as in brambles, and there's an area that can be for that. Other people are kind of really horticulturally want to grow, and so that might be their contribution towards nature, having a kind of growing patch. But I think that don't worry about the rules. Don't worry about what one website might say compared to another. I think these things are pretty instinctive in us, even people who are really removed from it. I think the key thing is stepping off. A bit like your first visit to the gym, and no one wants to go to the gym, and you're worried about what the other people in the class might think, and whether you're as bendy as the other yogis, whether they're going to laugh at you. But ultimately, we can all put things in the way all the time of all sorts of things. In the end, it's for those of us who step off and try that new thing. So I think number one is just stepping off and doing something however small, and letting go a bit, and not getting too. Rewilding is outcome non-specific.
Yeah.
And so getting that mindset is really important.
And it's not difficult to have a biodiversity net gain, is it? By simply not mowing parts of your lawn, you will have a biodiversity net gain, and you haven't had to put a single trowel in the ground. Yeah,
and I think another thing that, again, maybe it's a bit bookish, but if wherever you live, and I appreciate this is less true in densely populated cities than maybe towns, but if there's usually these older books that you can look at, past times books, if you actually look through them and try and configure what you're looking at compared to what is now, every single one, the picture will have a more naturalistic, rough look, a village green, or somewhere within your village where there might have been an orchard. You'll be amazed to see how stripped down, how few trees, how few hedges, how manicured almost everywhere is compared to a book from the 70s or 50s. Or
good old ladybird
and it's
books.
quite interesting. Yeah, it's quite interesting that if people are worried about it not being right. But I think that's the thing is, and I would challenge anyone once you start that, and I'm an advocate of this, and a sort of a real evangelical advocate of this is okay, this is a different scale, but I didn't really, when I first came back, I didn't really enjoy the land part of my existence that I'd grown up with. I had a really nostalgic memory of the farm and going around the farm with my dad and the guys on the farm and the tenants and the animals and of course shooting in those days and all that stuff. But I was very, very attached to it, and I couldn't find my access point as a mature person coming back, and I felt isolated from it. And I think I then sort of broke through this sort of invisible glass ceiling, if you like, and this rewilding, but nature recovery, regenerative farming and gardening has given me that, recovered that access point. And I think a lot of people probably aren't aware that they feel like that, but they do feel like that. And so I'd be amazed if anyone who starts a rediscovery of what it feels like to not wonder realise what they've been missing and wonder why they didn't do it ages ago. And won't have an evangelical amount of joy from just seeing something happen. And that is...
But that's a good point you make.
It's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's the answer.
No. But I was just going to say, as a bit of a roundup, to just sit and observe. Because even if you've just got a window box, like you say, or a balcony with some plants, just sit and watch it. Take some time out. Leave your phone inside. And just sit in the natural world. Try and get, used to the birds calling, and try and identify some of them, and just get a general, field guide on some of the wildflowers of the UK, and start to identify them. Because I get an enormous amount of gratitude from being able to walk into the countryside and go, that's an oak tree, that's I know it's obvious, but a dandelion, that's a mason bee, for example, or there's a common blue butterfly. So I think just getting in, like you say, reconnecting and identifying what's out there and starting to learn. It might seem daunting. It's still daunting to me, and I've been looking at this stuff for 30 years now. But there's still stuff I'm learning. There's plants I'm learning about in the UK that I thought I didn't know that was native here. So I think just starting that journey and just sitting and observing what comes in and out of your garden is a real eye-opener.
Yeah, and actually, that makes me think of. I mean, I'm not trying to have the last word at all, but actually, one thing that
You're very welcome
for
to have the
people
last word.
who don't feel that they have, are not connected at all. It's a pretty obvious point, and I always do this in schools. But what do we thrive off? We thrive off networks, social activity, connectivity, hotspots where we can go like out for the evening or go shopping or whatever it is. Well, always try and relate what we need and what we enjoy to what nature needs and enjoys, because it's almost exactly the same. They need hotspots to go and feed. They need safe places to have a family, to be protected from the weather. They need space to exercise and to enjoy, particularly birds and they need connectivity with other species, both in terms of food sources, but also in terms of, getting together. Most species are pretty social.
Yeah.
It's quite, I think one of the problems is people are so disconnected, they've forgotten that obvious principle, whether it's your farmyard ducks or your house martins or your butterflies. You don't have to be one, but to recognise that they kind of need exactly what we need. And the very thing that we thrive off and give ourselves, connectivity through roads, through phones, through the tube, through telephones, and all that stuff, computers, is the thing we've spent a lifetime depriving nature of. We've taken away all of those things and just give them back, and immediately they do much better. And as you say, no scale is too small. So, that's my closing statement.
I love it. No,
here
thank you.
ends the lesson.
Thank you. Yeah. No. Well. Thank you sincerely. I've thoroughly enjoyed my visit. I very much hope it's not my first and last visit.
No.
And I'm very hopeful that we can work together to try and push the Map of Dreams. So if you are looking to do anything today, and you don't even have to leave the comfort of your own home, sign up to the Map of Dreams. And how can people do that, Hugh? What's the best way?
So I mean, you can do it through the link through Instagram, but if not, through our website. So I'll
put a link to your website in the description below this video, by the way, so people can just click below. But
and I think at first point it's a skin deep thing. There are lots of people who want to be really detailed and forensic about what they're doing, and that's fantastic. But actually, much more than that, it's about saying, I recognise the crisis I'm in. I want to do something. And just start that journey, and then you'll find other people on the map, maybe near you. So it's that sort of, and actually what's so remarkable is that we've been sitting here for the years telling people to do some wild gardening or rewilding in their garden, but everyone says, well, how? And then now, 5 years later, we found you to
I think
to
there's
explain
more
how,
of a
so hopefully we
collaboration
can
here than we
act-
both realise in a minute. So we're working on that. Yes. So. But no, thank you, Hugh. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for showing me the wonderful things you're doing here. I'm sure I'll come back to document how things are over the years as well. And yes, thank you so much for all the detail you've given us today. It's fascinating, the insight into that different world that most of us have in our 2-3 bed houses. Looking at farmlands from the outside and how they're managed, and to have your view, I think, is essential in today's world. So thank you sincerely.
Well, my pleasure. I hope it's been interesting.
It's been
and
very
help.
interesting.
Inspiring, I should say.
Yes, and if you enjoyed it, please comment below. So thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like and do follow the channel. I'll be sure to bring you more content from here at Hugh's wonderful abode and all the magical things he's doing. Stay tuned, stay wild. I'll see you all very soon.